Welcome everybody to the Shebeen. We are going to be chatting Irish whiskey all evening. I hope you're all well wherever you're joining us from, whether it's the United States, whether it's Ireland, whether it's Asia, as we often have folks joining us from. You're very welcome. Lots of Irish whiskies to talk about. I'm curious to know what's in your glass. We're going to dive into all the latest whiskey releases that took place in the last week. We're going to talk about whiskies that are going to be released in the coming week. We're going to talk about upcoming virtual and in-person Irish whiskey events. We have a lot to cover in tonight's Shebeen. Look forward to sharing the crack and a drop of whiskey with you. Welcome to the Shebeen. If you're just joining us for the first time, the Shebeen is a weekly Irish whiskey show with one goal: to bring you closer to Irish whiskey and at the same time bring Irish whiskey closer to you by introducing you to the newest whiskies, talk about the distilleries and brands and people doing interesting things, sample some interesting pours together, maybe dive into an interesting question around Irish whiskey together, and talk about the ways that we can all engage in Irish whiskey and celebrate Irish whiskey together. The Shebeen is a quintessential part of Irish culture. Every town, every village has a Shebeen. It's an illicit pub. It shouldn't exist. It does exist. It's behind closed doors. No money should be changing hands for alcohol because there's no such thing as a drinks license inside a Shebeen. We don't have a drinks license either, but we're still enjoying our whiskey together. And that's what happens all over Ireland. So when pubs close and people have nowhere to go, they might find themselves in a homemade bar. It might be out the back garden. It might be behind the kitchen. It might be under the stairs. Who knows? There's some pretty creative ways that people have found to get whiskey and drink inside them in Ireland, all in good fun, of course. We're going to talk about some interesting things tonight. Before we do that, I'm curious to know what you're drinking. I'll share with you what's in my glass in a second, but always fascinated to hear what's in people's glasses all over the world. We've got Talnua Bourbon Cask and Stay from Jeff Cleveland. Good man, Jeff. Jeff Timmy is starting with a Killowen Pinot Noir, Burgundy 10-year-old, very good, from the Banded series. Jeff Spencer has Short Cross Ryan Malt. Good choice. A very good early release from Short Cross there, the Ryan Malt. I've half my bottle finished behind me. John Ritko just poured the last from a bottle of JJ Corrie's The Cyber Monday. We'll be talking about JJ Corrie this evening as well, of course. David Stewart is drinking Teeling Chinkapin Oak out there in LA. John Doyle breaking out a glass of Roe & Co.'s collaboration with Killahora, the orchards in Cork. Good man, John. What else have we got? Mark McKenzie, you've got the Craic going to start. Fair play to you. The Craic Irish whiskey, which we released to our club members earlier this year. You've got a drop of water to hand. Good man. You need it. 63.11% or 126 proof. That could cure a lot of ills for you at that proof point. Kristen has got her trusty old Redbreast 12 tonight, feeling very Christmassy. I dropped a bottle of Redbreast 12 off to my sister tonight because she was making Christmas cakes and she wanted to soak all of the fruits in something suitable. She messaged me during the week and she said, might you have anything like a brandy or a whiskey? I said, I think I'll have a whiskey. I'm sure I'll find a whiskey. And no better whiskey for Christmas than Redbreast, those wonderful sherry cask components. Bob Hurley says it was a gold spot kill that preceded the chat tonight. Good man. Get rid of those bottles. We don't want them on the shelves. We want them in our bellies, don't we? Brian's got Pierce Lyons Cooper Select. Very good. We don't see many of those being mentioned. William has got Redbreast PX here. William Grass. Good man, William. And I have exactly the same in my glass because it's my whiskey of the week. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second and why we've chosen Redbreast PX to talk about, even though it's not for sale any longer, but we'll talk about it in a moment. All right, so keep me posted as you change glasses, change bottles. I'm always thrilled to hear and kind of fascinated to hear what you're enjoying. There's always a whiskey or two that makes an appearance that we haven't heard mentioned in a long time or that might stoke a bit of conversation. prompt a little bit of chat. If it's your first time joining us, you're very welcome. This is an informal chat about Irish whiskey. We're here to celebrate Irish whiskey and to do that together. I don't think Irish whiskey should be enjoyed alone. So whether you could find somebody virtually like you're doing now or in person, I think that's the best way to enjoy whiskey. I'm going to share with you what's happening in the world of Irish whiskey as we go through the evening. And if you've got any comments, feedback, abuse, hurl it my way and we'll regurgitate it, address it, do something with it in the over the course of the evening, over the next 8, 9, 10 hours as we settle in to a bit of whiskey enjoyment. Dave has got Dunville's James Fox sample. Good man, Dave. And congratulations on Dave's auction win he was celebrating in our Facebook group tonight. And Mark Smith has got Redbreast Small Batch, Batch 119. Excellent. That's the, oh yes, the small batch that came out a few years ago. US only release. All right, so let us get into it. And before we get started, we have a very simple request of you. And that is that if you're watching this on YouTube, because you are, there's no other way to watch this. We're going out on YouTube alone. We're abandoning Facebook for streaming. YouTube is our channel. All I'll ask of you is that you click on the subscribe button that is surrounding your video. You'll see it. Subscribe to the Stories and Sips channel. It costs you nothing. It helps other people see our channel as more and more people subscribe to it. And click the like button as well underneath the video. That's it. That's all. That's the price of your attendance tonight. That's your ticket cost. A subscription button press and a like, and we're done. That's it. You're off the hook. So let us start off tonight by discussing the latest Irish whiskey releases. And there have been just a couple in the last week. So as we've done this now, I think is our fourth Shebeen, maybe it's our third Shebeen. And we've been marveling over the past number of weeks how 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, the thought that every week we would have a new Irish whiskey to discuss, to talk about was a crazy thought. And I remember when I first got into Irish whiskey in 2016 in a big way, if we had a whiskey release a month, it was a big deal. And there weren't that many distilleries with mature stock in 2016. There was a handful and a few, and that's it. Today, we have a lot more. There's more coming on stream. There'll be more in the next few months that will release their own whiskey. And that's a marvelous thing because we're starting to see some unusual approaches to not just whiskey production, but whiskey marketing, whiskey packaging, whiskey community building, and all of these things are great because they help mature the category. They help introduce more people to Irish whiskey. So we're going to talk about just 2 whiskey releases this week. Interesting ones, unusual ones. I think you'll agree. So let us start with the first one. Oh no, let's start with Whiskey of the Week. Whiskey of the Week, yes, my Redbreast PX. And the reason why Redbreast PX is my Whiskey of the Week is because I was thinking about it today as I dropped off that bottle of Redbreast 12 to my sister for her Christmas cake. Redbreast has traditionally been known as the Christmas cake whiskey. And the reason it's been known as kind of the Christmas cake whiskey is because when we were growing up in Ireland, our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts would have made the Christmas cake and would have made the Christmas pudding in the kitchen the weeks leading up to Christmas. And the tradition was that they soaked the fruit that went into the Christmas cake in sherry or whatever alcohol they had to hand, but sherry was fairly typical, and sherry is that rich, sweet, fortified wine from the south of Spain, and that smell is so evocative. Anytime I smell a drop of sherry, I'm transported to the kitchen of my house in Cove in County Cork where I was growing up. Around Christmas time, you could smell that Christmas cake or that Christmas pudding being made or that fruit being soaked in sherry. So when we think of, when we smell Redbreast, those notes come back to us, come back to me anyway. And I know many others feel the same way because so much of Redbreast is the backbone of the Redbreast brand is the pot still whiskey that has been matured in a fortified wine cask, typically sherry. And we've seen recently more expansions into the likes of port with things like Redbreast 27. But sherry is the backbone of Redbreast. It was what the original Redbreast would have been matured in. And so it's become known as the kind of Christmas cake whiskey. And Redbreast PX, I think, to me, takes it to a whole new level because Redbreast PX was released last year and it was announced as being the second in the Iberian series of whiskies. We didn't know there was a first until they told us, which was Redbreast Lustau. Redbreast Lustau, which was released all the way back in 2016. But Redbreast PX became then the second in a newly created series called the Iberian series. Iberian Peninsula, of course, being the 2-country peninsula made up of Spain and Portugal, hinting that we may see some more whiskies that have got contributions from the Iberian Peninsula, not just Spain, not just Portugal, but either one of them, and which is a great thing, or perhaps both of them. Redbreast PX is a non-age statement single pot still whiskey. We could estimate it's a 6 to 9 year old pot still whiskey. Midleton doesn't disclose it, but it does. What they do share with us is that it spends the final year of its maturation, it having been recast from its original bourbon and sherry, Oloroso sherry, matured components, vatted together, and then it spends a final year in a sherry, a PX Pedro Jimenez sherry hogshead. Now, a hogshead is a smaller sherry cask than we typically be used to. Sherry butts would typically be about 500 litres in size. A hogshead would be about 250 litres. So this hogshead previously contained Pedro Jimenez sherry. Pedro Jimenez is the sweetest of all the sherries. Rich, dark brown sugar notes, sweet, sweet, sweet. And this is where the wonderful pot still whiskies that had come from the bourbon barrel and come from that Oloroso sherry cask spent their final 12 months. And on the nose, it is, and it takes, for me, took me about 10 minutes in the glass for it to open up. But you get these wonderful cellar notes of wood. You get these, you get orange, but you get a kind of a cooked orange. You get those wonderful, like orange that's been soaked in, that's cooked in a brown sugar syrup almost. Flambéed in brown sugar syrup. Little cinnamon notes, but it is rich even on the nose initially. Bottle of 46%, 92 proof, a little bit more than our typical Redbreast 12-year-old at 40%. And it's got this absolutely sublime balance for me of dark fruit notes, vanilla coming through, hint of vanilla. It's got a wonderful, wonderful, it's kind of a oiliness, coats your tongue, coats your teeth, from that pot still spice. Lovely kind of a black pepper spice coming through in it, but this lovely dance of a kind of a musty wine, a sweet, dark, brown sugar soaked plum, just juicy, dark fruits. And it's just, for me, when it was released, it was the nicest Redbreast I'd ever tried under €100. And I still maintain to this day, it is the best Redbreast under €100. I think it was 89 maybe when it was released first, and it's a fantastic whiskey. And I bring it up today because of Christmas. I think about sherry, I think about Christmas, I think about Redbreast. And Redbreast PX can still be found in different places. It can be found on the secondary markets too, auction sites. You'll find it behind the bar in some places around the United States and in Ireland as well. But if you ever get a chance to try it, Redbreast PX edition, you should try that. I killed a bottle earlier, and I opened a second one that I luckily had on my shelf. So I'm glad I've got that one. That'll keep me going through Christmas. Redbreast Pedro Jimenez edition. There'll be more in the Iberian series. Keep an eye out. There'll be many more. Eamon says he made his Christmas cake last week and he'll be feeding it with whiskey for the next month. That's the way to do it, for fear it might die of the thirst. All right. Kristen has never been able to get her hands on a bottle of PX, but has the Lestau. Will that be a limited release? The PX is a limited release. Yeah, that was a limited release. They didn't share exact numbers, but we suspect it was around 30,000 bottles. Kristen also says she has the same glass as mine. She stole hers from Bon Accord in Glasgow. This broadcast is being shared with Bon Accord for their records. We've CC'd the security team there at Bon Accord to make sure they can get that glass back. Tyrone says, hello from Nova Scotia. Hoping you might talk a bit about Bushmills tonight. I plan to visit the distillery in January. All right, Tyrone, well, you're very welcome to the show. I hadn't planned to talk about Bushmills, but I will squeeze it in. We'll find a way to get Bushmills in, so stay tuned. All right, let us move on from our Whiskey of the Week to our first whiskey release. And that is this one. So, Irish American whiskey. We don't hear a lot about them. We had Sean McKay, one of the founders of the distillery, on our lock-in a couple of years back, 18 months ago, I'd say at this stage, we had Sean McKay on. Irish American whiskey comes from Achill Island Distillery off the west coast of Ireland, northwest coast of Ireland, off the Mayo coast. And Achill Island Distillery is Ireland's only island distillery. the only island distillery making whiskey. Now you can suggest there's other distilleries out there making gin and vodka on islands, and there are, but there are none as yet who are making whiskey on an island. And Irish American now has become the first distillery to release an Irish whiskey entirely produced on an Irish island. This is a 3-year-old single malt that was launched very quietly last week, and I just stumbled across it on the Irish American Facebook page, and I reached out to Sean for some more details. But 3 years ago, they distilled their first whiskey on the island in the Achill Island Distillery, and it's a single malt, and it has been aged in ex-bourbon barrels and ex-Bordeaux casks. It's bottled at 47% ABV, and there are only 400 bottles of this inaugural release available, 120 euros. We've had the discussion in the past couple of weeks about whiskey pricing, and two areas where we're seeing whiskey prices going up. And that is, one is on the older, limited, rare, hard to get stock, the 18-plus-year-old stock that's out there. And the second is inaugural releases. And these small, independent, family-run, as is the case of Achill Island Distillery, family-run, family-founded distilleries, will take years and years and years and years of releases like this to recoup even their initial investment in the distillery. And so we should expect that the inaugural release, which is there'll only ever be one, and this one inaugural release, 120 euros, is a kind of a ceremonial release, isn't it? It's something that many people might buy, and they might keep it on their shelf to mark this moment. Certainly proud people in County Mayo and on Achill Island might do that. But of course, it can be opened as well and enjoyed. But now that they've got their first release out there, we would expect that future releases would be priced slightly differently. This will be available from the distillery as of now, I believe, and then in December it'll be available from Irish Malts with a little bit higher price, maybe 130 euros, I believe, from Irish Malts in December. Irish American, well worth checking out. Really fascinating distillery. They've had some tragedy with the death of Sean's father. Died passed away before he ever got to saw the whiskey come of age, as did the head distiller. And Sean and his brother and his family, they have taken over and run the distillery, marketed the whiskey. They've been sourcing whiskey up to now. Irish American whiskey, you might have seen some of it, 10-year-old whiskey and a younger whiskey out on the market. But this now is their first ever release from Achill Island Distillery. So we should always celebrate an inaugural release, because it takes an awful lot to get to this point. And we cannot even begin to imagine the sleepless nights that go into building a business that very few banks will want anything to do with, because of the risks associated with it and the lack of a guarantee of any return. You could wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years and discover that nobody wants your whiskey, and you've no way to repay your loans. So these are tough undertakings for any family to do. So congratulations to Sean, congratulations to the family, and looking forward to sampling a drop of this and continued success. So I love seeing a success story like this, and Sean was just so enthusiastic when he joined us on the lock-in about 18 months ago. So really encouraged about that. Tyrone says, I think Ireland is an island. Well, I mean, we can split hairs. It is, but there is an island within an island, and that is the island of Achill. I grew up on an island in Ireland. I grew up on the Great Island, which is in Cork Harbour. I'm an island boy myself, so I have a great respect for the islanders who are doing good things. That's the first release. The second release, also something interesting, something new. And I should pull up my email here, because there's so much to talk about with these releases. And before we move on from Sean's, let me just make sure I've shared all the information here about the Achill Island Distillery. Yeah, the single malt is the first Irish whiskey to be milled, distilled, matured, and bottled on an island in Ireland. How about that? Sweet and smooth single malt with an abundance of flavor. All right. So congratulations on that. Let us move on to the next of our new releases. This is an interesting one. Element Irish Whiskey. You've not heard about that before. Element Irish Whiskey has just launched in the last 2 weeks a new Irish whiskey company. And this is a different approach now to whiskey releases. So as the Irish whiskey category matures, we're going to see some creative ways, not just new creative ways or approaches to production, We're going to see creative approaches to bottling, to maturation, to marketing, to engagement, community building. Element Irish Whiskey positions themselves as one such company, and I'm going to share some of their information with you. So, because it's quite different. So, Element Irish Whiskey, and you can find the details of the whiskies on elementirishwhiskey.com. But so this is their first release. It's called Fusion Series, and it is a Fusion Series or 1.0. It's a blended Irish whiskey. It's very affordable, just €49 a bottle, 47% ABV. It's a blend of malt and grain whiskies, as many entry-level whiskies are. Very high in grain, typically. The lower the price, typically the higher the grain component, as grain historically, or corn, maize has been traditionally a lot cheaper to utilize in the production of whiskey than barley has been, either with pot still whiskey or malt. So this has been aged in a combination of ex-bourbon, virgin American oak casks, Oloroso sherry casks, and seasoned stout casks. So quite the range, range of casks here. Seasoned stout cask, asks John. What does that mean? So seasoned stout cask is no different than Jameson cask mates, as an example. So rather than a whiskey stout, for the most part, like Guinness doesn't age in wooden barrels anymore. Guinness is produced and then put into stainless steel kegs. Historically, of course, they were stored in wooden barrels. But Jameson cask mates is an example of a whiskey that has been made with a seasoned stout cask. In other words, you take a barrel, you fill it with stout for a period of time so that the wood can drink that stout, soak it in, and then after a period of time, it is dumped out. That is a seasoned stout cask. Sherry casks, most sherry casks finding their ways to Ireland today and Scotland are seasoned sherry casks. In other words, they never contained sherry for a full maturation. They were seasoned perhaps for up to 2 years in Jerez in Spain, and then that sherry was dumped out, and it wouldn't have even been, in many cases, bottle grade sherry. It might be grade that's a little bit lower, it might end up being used for cooking, but a seasoned cask has been filled with one thing, dumped out, and it's only been filled up with that liquid purely for the purposes of imparting some of the flavor from that liquid into the wood. So let's talk a little bit about Element Irish Whiskey, and from their website. So I'll read out their press release, because there are some unusual approaches here to a press release. So typically we would get a lot of detail about the whiskey itself and its maturation, maybe its age, its components, etc. But here we get something a little bit different. Actually, this is 43%. Is it 43%, not 47? So let's just say 43%. Okay. So it is a small batch blended Irish whiskey. And according to the co-founder, Fionn Cox, he stated that the whiskey category is steeped in myth, mystery, legend, and nearly every Irish whiskey is named after a place name or a family name. What Element Irish Whiskey is hoping to do is pay homage to the tradition, but also to do something different and create a brand that will enable consumers to get more from their whiskey. And how are they going to do that, you might ask? As you should. And Fionn goes on to say, instead of telling our customers what to like, what if our whiskey could be inspired and developed based on consumers' feedback and ideas? And so the idea for an open innovation whiskey company was born. So Element strives to be the world's first open innovation whiskey company as they seek to create the alternative experience of Irish whiskey for whiskey drinkers who want to explore beyond the standard. On a mission to democratize whiskey, co-founder Fionn Cox stated, besides whiskey, my business partner and I have a background and an interest in technology, and we asked ourselves what would happen if we did things differently compared to other whiskey companies, and instead of telling our customers what to like, we let them tell us. And they seek to harness open innovation. So you might say, well, isn't that just consumer feedback? Isn't that what all whiskey companies do? Is they ask people their feedback on the whiskey, and then based on feedback, they will inform future releases, inform the whiskies. I haven't had a chance to speak to Fionn in person and ask him how they will intend to go about that. But there's talk on their website of building a community, and that community will inspire future releases. And I haven't had a chance to dive deeper into it. Hopefully, and I suspect it's more than just market research informing future whiskey releases, but I will find out more and share it with you. The idea of personalization and involving consumers in the whiskey, of course, is a great thing. And the challenge, of course, lies in how you do that at scale and how you can actually solicit feedback from the people who are most representative of the largest potential segment of the audience you're hoping to reach to make your whiskey company a success. So there are millions and millions of dollars spent every year on market research and sensory panels and feedback panels and blind tastings to solicit feedback on what people like and don't like. There are trends that are evaluated and market research done to understand different palates in different countries and what they like and what they don't like. So on the surface, it sounds a bit like this is just market research, but I suspect it's not. But we'll find out more about it. In any case, Element Irish Whiskey, this is the first in their series, and it looks like there are a few more whiskies coming behind it. But I'll be very curious to see, how do you solicit feedback and build a community that builds the next whiskey? That'll be the interesting one. So we'll see. Jeff wonders if it's similar to Crowded Barrel in Texas that classified itself as a crowdsourced distillery. Interesting. Are they a blender or a bonder? Are they a blender or a bonder? So we could, okay, so if you dive into that one. So, I mean, a bonder is simply somebody who doesn't blend then, if you're separating the two out. A whiskey bonder is just somebody who packages it up and lets somebody else, that's a distillery, do the blending, and then they do the bonding. It would sound to me that they are neither right now, and that they are sourcing whiskey and that is blended together to their specifications, perhaps at the distillery, and perhaps they're going to give us some feedback, or they're going to share with us how they intend to source that feedback. So the words innovation get thrown around a lot in the Irish whiskey category and in the whiskey category generally. Innovation, I would argue, is a very high bar to reach. Very, very high bar. There's not a lot that's innovative that hasn't been already done. Very hard to get to really say that is the most innovative thing I've seen. So let's give Fusion Series or 1.0 a chance, Element Irish Whiskey a chance, and looking forward to hearing how they intend to go about that. All right. David Stewart is switching it up. Kirkland Isla Single Malt. There you go. Costco's Isla Single Malt. Good man. Cheryl is joining us as well. Hello to Cheryl. And Joseph is drinking a 15-year-old Taraket Armagnac, no less. Some Cork fella recommended it. Outstanding. Bang of redbreast cask strength off it now. And Cheryl is sipping on the craic. Excellent. All right. Let us talk about Blackwater Distillery. So Blackwater Distillery is about to release 4 whiskies all at once. They've never released a whiskey that they've made themselves yet, and then all of a sudden 4 come along. It's an interesting time in the world of Irish whiskey, and Blackwater Distillery have been banging a drum for a few years now. So what they're going to release in the next week is what they're calling a Manifesto box. And this Manifesto box consists of 4 200 milliliter bottles. So 800 milliliters in total. So a little over a full bottle that we would typically be used to. They're going to release 4 mash bills. And the reason is they have been making whiskey at Blackwater Distillery for the past 4.5 years. They've been making gin. They've been sourcing whiskey and releasing it under the Velvet Cap name. They've been releasing whiskey under the Puka name and selling it to grocery store chains in Ireland and further afield. But this is their first time they've released their own whiskey, and it is whiskey that is based on historic mash bills. These are old mash bills dating back to the 1800s and early 1900s, and these mash bills are representative of what pot still whiskey would have been at the time. Pot still whiskey would have been a very different beast to the pot still whiskey formula that we're used to today, and how it's defined and how it's decreed by European law. And Blackwater Distillery wants us to try 4 of their samples because 4 of their different whiskies have come of age all at the same time, and they think it's about time that we got it into our hands. So let's talk a little bit about Blackwater Distillery and these whiskies, and I'll talk about their launch event taking place this week, which you're all invited to as well, by the way. So these 4 whiskies are being called this Manifesto box. Now, it's priced at €250 for their inaugural releases. I suspect these will be quite the collector's item in years to come, because Blackwater Distillery is would be very much along the lines of a Cologne distillery in terms of their maniacal vocal focus on blending the old with the new, the past. Historically, how are things done? How did grains lend flavor to the spirit as opposed to the barrels? What types of casks used are secondary to the grains that are used? And Blackwater is fascinated, focused on these old historic mash bills of we'll talk about them in a second because I've got these 4 actually to hand that I'll talk to you about in a little bit. But before I do that, I want to just set the stage for Blackwater Distillery. And Blackwater Distillery has not been well known in the United States to date because they haven't shipped any whiskeys to the United States. They will ship to the United States in early 2023 or mid 2023, depends on how their launch goes here. The US is certainly on the cards for them. They're based in County Waterford, just a stone's throw from the East Cork border. So you could almost call them Cork. In any case, they're at West Waterford in a town called Ballyduff, and they are based in an old hardware store. This is a picture of the old hardware store just after they took it over, McCarthy's hardware store, and you'll see inside it, look, this was the old hardware store when they took it over. You can see it doesn't look very much like a distillery at all. However, you can already tell there's bones there, can't you? You can see, all right, there was a bit of vision, obviously, of what this could be. And sure enough, it has been turned into a distillery, Blackwater Distillery, which have been producing whiskey for the past 4.5 years. Peter Mulryan is the co-founder, and Peter Mulryan is no stranger to whiskey. He is a whiskey historian and writer himself. He has written and published many, many books on the history of Irish whiskey. In fact, if you go to old Midleton Distillery YouTube channels, you'll find Peter talking about pot still whiskey and its resurgence, and being a narrator for many videos and mini documentaries about Midleton and Irish distillers over the years. But at one point in the last 6, 7, 8 years, Peter Mulryan had an insight. He had a nugget of information that wouldn't leave his head, and that was that the whiskies we make today, the pot still whiskies that he was very, very familiar with, bore no resemblance to the pot still whiskies that were made historically. Now, why, you might ask, is that important? Well, as a whiskey historian and a writer, he was intrigued. He was wondering, how come the whiskies we have today don't any longer bear a resemblance to the whiskies that we had back in the 1800s and back in the early 1900s? Now, he knows the answers. We all know the answers today. It's for various reasons, like the Irish whiskey industry was almost decimated, almost disappeared from the late 1860s, 1870s, all the way up to the 1960s, 1970s, with this lost century of Irish whiskey, where Irish whiskey did nothing but decline. During that time, Midleton Distillery in County Cork was one distillery that was able to keep going, and they were the only maker of pot still whiskey in Ireland from the early 1970s up until 2010, 2012, with the arrival of the likes of Dingle Distillery. So for a 50 or 60 year period, there was only one distillery in Ireland making pot still whiskey, and that was the Midleton Distillery. So when the rules were written in the 1980s, the 1990s, and then updated in 2008, 2014, for what pot still whiskey could be, Ireland was really relying on one producer, which was the Midleton Distillery, because they were the only ones making pot still whiskey. Therefore, the way they made pot still whiskey was how pot still whiskey was made in Ireland. And that was a fantastic thing at the time, because they were able to keep the flag going, or fly the flag, keep pot still whiskey in production when others no longer made it. After all, pot still whiskey was the predominant style of Irish whiskey in Ireland for a century, leading up to its demise. And with the arrival of new distilleries, the arrival of Cork, West Cork Distillers, the arrival of Dingle Distillery, the arrival of Great Northern Distillery, and on Kilbeggan coming back online, and more, suddenly folks began to question and ask, why could we not make pot still whiskey the way it used to be made? Well, you can make whiskey any way you want, so long as it is made from a fermentable grain aged for 3 years on the island of Ireland in wooden barrels in a bonded warehouse. You can call it Irish whiskey. But to have that moniker of pot still whiskey or single pot still whiskey from one single distillery, it must be made today from a mash bill that is made up of no less than 30% unmalted grains, no less than 30% malted grains, barley, and up to 5% other. So up to 30% malted barley, up to 30, let's start that one more time. A minimum of 30% unmalted barley, a minimum of 30% malted barley, and up to 5% other grains like oats, rye, wheat, maize. The Midleton Distillery makes their whiskies with barley. They don't use other grains. They don't use oats. They don't use barley, or they don't use oats. They don't use rye. They don't use corn in their pot still whiskies. One of the first whiskies released that pot still whiskies that did contain other grains was Drumshanbo's whiskey, single pot still whiskey, which contained Irish oats. In any case, Peter reckoned, no, we need to look at these old mash bills and we need to bring them back and we need to be allowed to call them pot still whiskey. So there has been a vocal minority of craft producers who are banging the drum for this old style, how mash bills used to be made, how whiskey used to be made, to come back, to allow them to make it the way it used to be made, to allow them to be more representative of the styles of whiskey that would have been commonplace in Ireland in the early 1900s. And we know that these rules are now being evaluated, they are being revised, or at the very least evaluated. And the hope is that you could contain, you'd be allowed to include far more than 5% other grains like oats or rye or wheat or maize in your mash bill if you wanted to. So Peter is vocal. He is in the best way, because we need agitators, we need commentators, we need those who don't believe that just because one thing was done for 50 years, it's how it should always be done. And I think there's an acknowledgement that Midleton and Irish distillers kept the category alive. But now that there's 42 distilleries on the island of Ireland, and not just the two that were there when I was growing up in the 1980s, Bushmills and Midleton, then maybe, just maybe, we should reevaluate how these whiskies are made today and how we can call the whiskies we make pot still whiskies. So let me show you the whiskies. So these whiskies will be released on November 30th. These 4 whiskies, 200 milliliters each. I have 4 press samples here that are not the same size as those that will be released, but these are 4 samples of the 4 whiskies that will be released. That's called Dirtgrain. Dirtgrain whiskey is the whiskey brand that's coming out of Blackwater. And I think it's important that we pay attention to it, because these are very different whiskies than we're used to. And this is going to start tongues wagging, and there's going to be people saying, I love them, and people saying, I'm not sure. And that's great for conversation. And these are very, very different whiskeys. So I've got 4 samples here. I know 30 of our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club members were lucky enough to get these as well. We ran a ballot, we ran a raffle within our whiskey club, and 30 of you received these. They were shipped to you in the United States this week. I know lots of them have already landed. So here is the, this little card comes with them, and there are 4 different mash bills in here. So let us talk a little bit about them. For example, mash bill number 8 is an Irish whiskey. And again, they're not called single malts. They're not called single pot stills. They're just Irish whiskey, because they don't fit any of the categories today that would allow them to fit into malt, grain, or pot still whiskies. So the other catch-all is Irish whiskey. Mash bill number 8 was just aged in bourbon casks. 50% Gangway and Laureate malt, 35% Laureate barley, and 15% Husky oats. That's number 8. Aged in a bourbon barrel and for about 4 years, 45% ABV. That's one of them. And again, I'm just reading these out for another reason, just to give you some information on them. Mash bill 15. So listen to this one. This is inspired by a mash bill from 1915. The first one was inspired by a mash bill from 1908. So mash bill number 15 was aged in a rye cask. So a cask that previously contained rye whiskey. 40% Laureate barley, 30% Gangway plus Laureate malted barley, 15% Husky oat, 12% Costello wheat, and 3% Performer rye. These are complex, very varied, very different mash bills. Mash bill 38, aged in an apple brandy cask. Now, apple brandy, inspired by a mash bill from, wait for it, 1838. Folks, that's before the Irish famine. So before the Irish famine, 1839 to 1845 to 1849. Before the famine in Ireland, 1838, this was the style of whiskey that was being made. 40% laureate barley, 40% Costello wheat, and 20% Gangway plus laureate malted barley. Wheat and barley. So malted barley, unmalted barley, and wheat from 1838. So those are just examples of these whiskies. Peter is, I mentioned he's a vocal, outspoken proponent of historic mash bills. So they're combining how they've been made historically with how they're being made today. And so to go with these whiskey releases, we have here a Manifesto, which is a book written by Peter, a manifesto for pot still Irish whiskey. You will note there is no E in the spelling of whiskey. There doesn't have to be in Ireland. We can spell it 3 ways. Irish whiskey with an E, without an E, or in the Irish language, Uisce Beatha Éireannach, Irish whiskey, Uisce Beatha Éireannach. In any case, a manifesto for pot still whiskey is Peter's overview, his belief in what pot still whiskey should be. And he is putting a flag in the ground and saying things like, Irish whiskey used to be made with a wild mix of grains, and we've got some of the old mash bills to prove it. They're our starting point, but we don't follow them to the letter. We're happy to stand on their shoulders and reach higher. The quest for flavor is never ending. And the manifesto main document here is basically Peter saying, it's Irish whiskey as it's meant to be. It's a limited edition exploration and flavor inspired by traditional Irish mash bills. 100 years ago, Irish whiskey ruled the world. It was made with a mix of grains, oats, barley, wheat, and rye, grown on Ireland's soil, and the grains were the thing. They made a whiskey so full of flavor, it didn't need years in casks to taste of something. We're making whiskey like this again, using the mash bills recipes from Irish pot still whiskey's heyday. This is more than a first release from our Ballyduff distillery. This is a manifesto of intent. While we draw inspiration from the past, and that's what is celebrated here, our eye is firmly fixed on the future. Our objective is not simply to recreate historic mash bills. We want to redefine the category. Join the revolution. Join it. He's telling us, getting us fired up. He's nailing his proclamation to the door. Martin Luther style. And he's telling us that how it's been made historically over the past 50 years is not how he'd like to make whiskey. So what's the takeaway from all this? The takeaway is that we've got agitators, creators, visionaries, people putting their money where their mouth is, saying, I want to make whiskey a different way than how it's been made. Not that it's better than how it used to be made, but it's different. And what's that mean for us? It means we've got choice. It means we've got options. It means we can choose what we pay, what we buy, from whom. We can see and sample many, many different types and styles of whiskey and find maybe one that suits us best. It'll allow new people enter the category. It'll create news. It'll create stories. It'll create headlines. And that's a good thing. So you can join the launch of this on November 30th, which is taking place on the Blackwater Distillery's Facebook page and YouTube channels. I'll be hosting it. Peter and the team asked if I would host their launch. And I said, I will if you give our lovely Whiskey Club members some free kits to sample it themselves. And they said, of course we will. Let us see. The launch is on November 30th, 8 p.m. Irish time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Folks, this is an important launch. And I believe in what they're doing. I have had a sneaky little sip of each of these 4 samples and 4 more different whiskies you couldn't find. There's nothing like them on the market today, and each of the 4 is different to the others in that little kit as well. So this is the start. Just like Irish American, Achill Island Whiskey saying, we're putting our first whiskies out into the market. Blackwater Distillery is doing exactly the same. So I would encourage you to join us to celebrate the launch, to ask questions. If you have this kit, please tune in. Don't miss it. We want your feedback. As soon as that launch is over, the whiskey will be available to purchase, and you can purchase it via Irish Malts, who will ship it to the United States if you want. They're running a ballot currently on the Blackwater Distillery Facebook page, but they have 1,000 kits available. So I suspect there'll be enough to go around for this first launch. And if you do want one, you can go visit their Facebook page. You can enter your name in the ballot, but Irish Malts will have some available on November 30th, as soon yeah, I think the morning of November 30th, they'll have some available. All right. Steve says he won the ballot for the tasting kit as a Stories and Sips Club member, and he's planning on entering the ballot for the release box too. It's going to make some waves. Good man, Steve. I agree. All right, let me look back at some of your comments that have been coming in there. Is this the same distillery that produces Blackwater gins? It is. So thanks, Irish Travels Mike. Up until now, Blackwater Distillery has been producing Blackwater gin, of which they have a Barry's tea version. They have a strawberry, Wexford strawberry gin. They have released Velvet Cap whiskey and Puka whiskey. Both these are sourced whiskies, and they have been doing a storming trade in their gin business. These are the first whiskies that they've distilled on site, matured, and are releasing that they have made themselves based on their historic mash bills. Kristen says Husky Oats was her nickname in middle school. She's feeling triggered. You were always destined to be in the whiskey world, so Kristen. Steve wants to know, weren't all the mash bills historically made with 100% Irish grains? Yes, up to a point, after which there were imported grains. So if you listen to the History of Irish Whiskey podcast, blatant plug here for the Stories and Sips website, there with Fionnán O'Connor, whiskey historian, talks about the corn laws, and he talks about the relaxing of the importation of non-domestic, so foreign corn, foreign maize into Ireland to ease the suffering of the people, because all the corn grown in Ireland was being shipped off overseas as the Irish died during the famine. In any case, there would have been a point where foreign, typically American maize, American corn came into Ireland originally. But that corn is not a native grain to Ireland. But Peter mentions it here: oats, rye, barley, and wheat would have been the Ireland's original grains. Brian says he's excited to read Peter's book. Yeah, look, it's a manifesto. I suspect that putting a whiskey out into the world is a nerve-wracking thing. I've had a little bit of experience with it, not having made the stuff, but with our wonderful releases with our whiskey partners, there's always that fear: what if nobody likes it, or what if there's no take up of our whiskey? Not only is he putting his whiskey out into the market, he's basically saying, before you've ever tasted it, I'm telling you what I think. So you get to buy into not just my whiskey, but my beliefs, my vision, my values, my purpose, the why we're doing this. And if that intrigues you, I think we can take you on a journey that we'll all enjoy together. So it's a stake in the ground, and that's a bigger move than just, here's a whiskey, try it, let us know how you think. No, it's saying we're burning the boats. We're not going back. We're making it this way now, so get used to it. All right, let me see. Jason says, shout out to excellent Irish malts. Yes, for those of you who were recent purchasers, and I'll talk about this in a second, of the Cliffs and Moher whiskey, it was Irish malts who are our shipping partner. They got these and are still shipping these all around the United States for us this week. Fantastic team to work with. Tyrone asks, why should one believe that old mash bills are better than what can be done today? You shouldn't. You shouldn't believe anything anyone tells you, ever. You should try it and decide for yourself. So Peter is putting a stake on the ground saying, I believe it. Waterford Distillery, 20 minutes drive from Blackwater Distillery, have the same belief that barley reigns, that barley is the king, and that the grain is the one that gives the most flavor. Yes, we will get flavors in other parts of the process. Of course, there's many parts of the whiskey making process, but without the grain and without a certain flavor of grain, we won't get the same flavor of whiskey. So there's nothing to tell us that old historic grains are better than grains today, but they're different. And that's important, I think, because over the past 100 years, the commercialization of the farming industry, the commercialization of crop growing, of crop genetics, of cross breeding has bred out flavors that were in existence 100 years ago. They've bred out flavors. They've made more resilient crops that are resilient to pesticides, artificial pesticides and herbicides. They've made crops that are better able to withstand commercial heavy tractor farming approaches to growing. Excuse me. And the fact of the matter is today that 80-90% of the distilling barley used across Europe is the same distilling barley. That means we've got a homogeneous flavor of barley, and we are therefore relying on every other aspect of the process to give us different flavors. How we distill, how we brew, how we mature, how we blend, how we cut, etc. But some distilleries like Waterford Distillery and Blackwater Distillery are saying, well, hold on a second. And many others, not just the two in Waterford. W.D. O'Connell is doing the same. They're saying, well, hold on a second. Why don't we start with the farmer? Why don't we start with the grain? If we can get a different grain, a grain that we have some control or input into how it's nurtured or brought back to life. Maybe there's old seeds that were practically extinct that have been regrown to a size that is that can be distilled, as is the case of Waterford Distillery. The argument is that we'll get to taste the past. We'll get a time capsule of what whiskey used to taste like. That's the argument. Now, Waterford Distillery are very clear and very go to great lengths to say, we're not trying to make the best whiskey in the world. We're trying to make a profound whiskey based on all of the inputs and all their approaches. But they say you have to decide if it's the best whiskey in the world. So you shouldn't believe anything anybody says. None of these whiskey companies should be believed for a second. Anything that goes in their brochure or their fancy website with the picture of gleaming copper pot stills, until you taste the whiskey, until you listen to the story, and until you decide for yourself, this matters. And this will not matter to everybody. The manifesto, there's some people who look at this and say, I don't care. Like, I don't want to listen to a man writing 60 odd pages about why he believes whiskey should be a certain way. I just want to taste the whiskey, and more power to you. Others will say, I'm not drinking my whiskey without a 67-page manifesto, and it allows us something for everyone. So better is subjective. And there's no such thing as the best whiskey in the world, is there? Matt says, the guy from Irish Malls was an airline pilot, right? He knows how to get things overseas. Yeah, John O'Donovan was an airline pilot, yeah. He flew out of the United Arab Emirates, out of Dubai. And now he flies whiskey all around the world from the comfort of his computer in Cork. Andrew says, having an interesting history or story always makes trying the whiskey more intriguing. Andrew, I agree with you. I personally agree with you. And I think others do too. I know a lot of people here. Look, the reason my company is called Stories and Sips, and not Sips and Stories, as many people think it is because the story to me comes first. Tell me about it. Tell me about the people. Tell me about the place. Tell me about the process. And then give me the pour. Because I want to understand it. I want to know what I'm drinking because I want to better evaluate it. Now, the other side of that is give me a blind tasting with a black glass that I can't tell you the color, and I have to understand the whiskey and decide if I like it or not. Those are different approaches. I happen to like the tell me the story. Let me see if I like what you're saying, if I like who you are, if I like what you stand for, and if I feel some connection, and I'll tell you what, I'll spend more money with you if I do. We're irrational creatures, aren't we? At heart, we don't buy rationally. Otherwise, why would there be $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 cars? Why would there be $5,000 shoes? These are not rational things. They're irrational, like us. And so we connect emotionally, we connect subconsciously, and we connect biologically with those who are like us or who we think best represent us. The reason there's a 3-pointed star on the front of some people's cars is because they think it reflects who they are as a driver, as a person, and others don't. So we're irrational, and I think it's the story to me is super important. Joseph has ordered one of Peter's old books on Amazon. Listen to some podcasts he was on. He's very charismatic. You can actually go to Stories and Sips website and go to one of our old podcast episodes. You'll find me interviewing Peter Mulryan 3 years ago, probably. Really great interview. All right. Kristen says, can we compromise with a 34-page manifesto? Kristen, it's waiting for you to write it. What's your manifesto? All right. So that is the Dirtgrain Irish Whiskey event. Will you join me there, please? Blackwater Distillery's Facebook page, Blackwater Distillery's YouTube channel, 3 p.m. Eastern, November 30th. All right, let's move on. But can I have a sip of whiskey first, if you'll permit me? Still on the Redbreast PX. It's the best Redbreast under €100 ever released. I'm taking a stand. I'm going to write a manifesto on it. Manifesto for Redbreast under $100, €100. Mark says we only need one page with bullet points. All right, we'll rewrite this with one page. Let me read out one little piece here. This is like Storytime with Barry. And it is, so here's a picture of John Wilcox, the distiller. John's from the United States, so you know he's great. And then over here, here's a little intro on distilling, right? So let me read this out to you. If I had a little fire here now, I'd light it. And I could, it could be Storytime with Barry. We'll put a little bit of music on. That's what we'll do now. We'll go to town. Oh, look, atmospheric. I'll turn down a small bit. All right, here we go. On distilling. This is Peter's manifesto now, right? Stills are shiny and lovely and get all the press, but flavor starts with the grain in the field. So, to keep the focus on the grain, we double distill to around 71% alcohol by volume, less ethanol, more congeners, more flavor. Distillation is about capturing and concentrating exactly the flavors we want and putting those into the barrel, which is why our stills don't have names. In fact, the only piece of equipment that does is the mash tun, and that's where the milled grains are mixed with water. She is Sheila, the mother, and that's where we start turning raw ingredients into wash, which will fill a fermenter, a huge waterbed for the yeast to romp in. And that's our focus, using traditional mash bills as inspiration, working with farmers to revive heritage grains, and then crafting every part of the process. All right. Do you want another bit of story time? Last bit. Okay. This one is on casks. See, his manifestos are full of big statements like the greatest trick the Scots ever played was convincing the world that age statements had something to do with quality. Now, that's like the line, the greatest trick the devil ever played. Okay, so here's a little bit about on casks and aging, all right? So let me read this out to you. Most Irish whiskey brands come from just a couple of distilleries. Not a whole lot to say really, so casks are a handy point of difference. We ourselves distill in Ballyduff using a mix of barley, malt, oats, wheat and rye. All grown and malted for us here in Ireland. More flavour going into the still equals more flavour coming out of the still. We don't need casks to do the heavy lifting for us. So, Irish whiskey has to be aged for at least 3 years. The flavours that come from the cask and the type of beer or spirit it previously held all impact on the spirit. The cask is not inert, so think of it as a lung, expanding in the summer and drawing spirit into the wood, contracting in the winter as the spirit leaches from the staves, drawing colour and flavour with it. Irish whiskey can be aged in any wooden cask as long as it is under 700 litres and has previously contained alcohol. Does it have to previously contain alcohol? It can be a virgin cask, no? Irish whiskey gets all its colour from the cask or from E150, plain caramel. We at Ballyduff do the former, not the latter. However much they are fated, most barrels end up in a garden centre stuffed full of petunias. So we decided to properly honour our first cask by giving it a lyrical second life. BLA0003 was an ex-sherry cask made with some lovely looking European oak, and we asked Paddy Tutty, an accomplished luthier from Dungarvan, to turn it into a fiddle. And that means you can sip on number 93 while tapping your foot to the parting glass. But he said, by definition, monopoly is the death of diversity, so it's no surprise to learn that the Irish whiskey industry's dirty little secret is the suppression of the mash bill or the recipe. Authenticity and flavour were sacrificed to the god of smoothness, and the category was left in a coma by those who put self-interest ahead of the consumer. that's not a manifesto. And fight and talk. I don't know what is. All right. Fight and talk. You're all getting sleepy. All right. Tyrone, before we go on, you want to know about Bushmills. Go to this YouTube channel and you'll see a trip to Bushmills on the channel that I did back in January. There's a little 20-minute video there visiting the distillery, and Stories and Sips Whiskey Club members have access to the full 4-hour lock-in into the distillery until 3 o'clock in the morning that we did that night with the master blender Alex Thomas and with Lauren McMullen, brand ambassador. We stayed into the wee small hours sipping every whiskey that the distillery has ever released, it seemed. But in any case, Bushmills, you're going to have a wonderful time when you visit. One of the greatest tours in Ireland. For my money, I love history. I love the family environment that's up at Bushmills. There is no malt distillery like Bushmills. The only thing they make in that distillery is malt whiskey, nothing else. Currently, no grain whiskey, just malt, malt, malt. And you'll see 10 pot stills cranking out that wonderful malt whiskey. The banana notes that are going to be in the air when you take the tour. Oh, incredible, incredible. Oh, excuse me. Drop coffee. All right. Bushmills is fantastic. Ask anybody in the group here, or go to our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group if you're not already in our group, and ask about Bushmills. People will tell you great stories on it. We visited the Bushmills distillery on our August whiskey bus tour. 30 of our group of our American friends and one Irishman, Frank, joined the tour, and we went to Bushmills, where they treated us to a day in all behind the scenes tours, visiting the warehouses. They have the oldest malt whiskey in Ireland aging in those warehouses. They have, to me, I mean, it's the best malt whiskey in the country. It's perhaps historically been underappreciated, under-marketed. The distillery has been under-managed. That's my personal opinion. And I think of late, things are looking up. There's been the building of a whole new distillery in the back garden to double capacity at the old Bushmills distillery. There's a lot to say. I could go on. I could do a whole episode on Bushmills alone. I recommend you checking out the Bushmills video on this channel, and then asking in our Facebook community, if you're on Facebook, about Bushmills as well. And if you have any questions specifically, throw them in the chat here, and I or somebody else will answer them. All right. Are we having the crack? If you are, will you please, if you've just joined us, all we ask, your price of admission to the Shebeen is as simple as clicking on the subscribe button and clicking on the like button underneath the video. That's it. Subscribe to the channel and like the video. That's it. No more, no less. All right. While I don't like to draw attention to these things, I must, because it happened this week and we're here to share Irish whiskey news. So thank you to all of you who listen to my spiel every week and every month. And for the past 6 odd years, I was delighted to pick up the Icon of Whiskey Award this week for Communicator of the Year from Whiskey Magazine for 2023 for the work we do with Stories and Sips. So thank you to all of you who tune in, who subscribe to this channel, who subscribe to our club, who support, who buy our whiskeys, who share and like our stuff on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Thank you. These awards do mean something to me anyway, because we put in the time here because we love Irish whiskey, but it's no harm every now and again for someone to say, I saw what you did there. It's nice. It's great. I want to congratulate the other winners as well. And certainly congratulations to Matt Healy from potstills.com, who was highly commended in the category. Between Matt and myself, we've both won it every year for the past 3 years. So this is the second time I've won it in the past 3 years. And thank you to Matt for being such a good communicator in the world of Irish whiskey too. And if you're not following potstilled.com, go check out Matt Healy. Matt was last year's winner. And the more people communicating and talking about Irish whiskey, the better. But I'm not here just to talk about me. I also want to mention some of our friends who we have engaged with over the past few years, who are also winners. Distiller of the Year was Irish Distillers, well earned, Kevin O'Gorman and the Midleton Distillery, which, I mean, is there a more prolific distillery on the island of Ireland? There's not. Craft Producer of the Year was Blackwater Distillery. And what an amazing honor and award in the same week that they're releasing their first whiskey. So they are the Craft Producer of the Year. And our good friends at Two Stacks Irish Whiskey are winners of Two Stacks, are winners of the Independent Bottlers of the Year, which is fantastic news. And in addition to that, Waterford Distillery were the brand innovators. And I think you will all understand and agree there's very few distilleries innovating in the way that Waterford Distillery is. So congratulations to all the winners from the Icons of Whisky. And I will be insufferable over the next year. You may only address me now as Icon. I will no longer answer to Barry. Any mention of the word Barry will be ignored. So please update your address books accordingly. Icon only now from here on out. All right. What are we moving on to next? Let me see. Tyrone says that the Storytime feature with the harp music will guarantee another win next year. I think that's the trick. Like, the communicator has to up his game, you know. All right, so let us talk about Irish whiskey ABVs, alcohol by volume. I put a poll in our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group this week, and 200 odd of you answered the poll with your thoughts on proof points, alcohol by volume of what Irish whiskey should be. So let's start this discussion, and I want to get your thoughts, I want to get your input, I want to get your feedback on Irish whiskey alcohol by volume or proof points. How much alcohol should be in the whiskey for you. Let's start by establishing that Irish whiskey must be a minimum of 40% alcohol by volume or 80 proof. That is by law. Anything less than that, it becomes a spirit drink. It's no longer a whiskey. And there is no technically upper limit on what, I don't believe there's an upper limit anyway, on what Irish whiskey can be, to the best of my knowledge. And there probably is. I don't have that to hand. But anyway, most Irish whiskies are between 40% and probably 65%, 66, 67% ABV. That's it. That's our range, right? Now, over the past 40 years, let's be honest, 99% of Irish whiskies, up until 5 years ago, 10 years ago, were all 40% ABV whiskies because they were designed to appeal to as large an audience as possible. Let's be honest, aside from this group of reprobates and ruffians who consume whiskey at a higher rate than is the Surgeon General's recommended intake on a week, with no judgment, I will add, most people don't drink whiskey the way we drink whiskey. Most people don't drink anything the way we drink whiskey. Most people don't drink anything of such a high proof point the way we might enjoy our whiskey. So Irish whiskey, in order for it to grab hold of a market position, in order to appeal to the largest group possible, was really introduced at the most approachable ABV. Jameson we're talking about, aren't we? It's the elephant in the room. It's the whiskey, the Irish whiskey that took over the world from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, up until the present day. 85% plus of all Irish whiskey sold on planet Earth is Jameson. And most of that was 40% ABV or 80 proof. So it appealed to a wide range of people, more approachable, and there wasn't the demand for a higher ABV. Now, a higher ABV, which means going up 41, 42, 43, 46, 50, 60, with every increase in percentage points of ABV, you're increasing your costs. Why? Because you're shipping less water and you're shipping more alcohol. And the less alcohol you can ship, the more money you can make. And so it's a very profitable business. If you can corner the market on a 40% alcohol by volume spirit, you're going to make more money per bottle, aren't you? Unless you're able to command megabucks for your higher proof whiskies. So Jameson did us all a fantastic service. It went out and it showed the world what a flavorful Irish drink could be that wasn't called Baileys or Guinness. And people have been enjoying Jameson in their droves. Last year, 120 odd million bottles of Jameson were consumed globally. 120 million bottles, 10 million cases of Jameson, which is incredible. So they're doing something right, which means that this group here, despite what we think, we are all in the minority. We are not, despite our narcissistic tendencies to assume that we have all the answers. 10 million cases of Jameson would tell us otherwise. So I rarely see people rocking up here saying, well, Barry, I just poured myself a remarkable shot glass of Jameson to enjoy your Shebeen. Instead, you're rocking up with your batch 119 Redbreast cask strength. You're rocking up with your J.J. Curry, the Gale, Bushmills releases from 1972, right? So we're not the normal group. but we don't have to be the normal group. We like our little corner of non-normalcy. And in this corner, we're experimenting, aren't we? We're trying different whiskies. We're embracing new whiskey releases. And with the rise of the number of distilleries, with the rise of the number of whiskies and whiskey bonders and blenders and marketers and merchants, we're getting access to different whiskies. In the last 2 years, more than 700 Irish whiskies have hit the market. Not a mistake in how I said that. 700 Irish whiskies. Now, I'm talking about some brands will have 10 different releases, but 700 Irish whiskies have hit the market. Not all of them will be at 40%. So some will be at cask strength. Some will be somewhere in between. In any case, we now, as seasoned whiskey drinkers, are enjoying a rising tide. And we're also enjoying the fact that more people are getting access to Irish whiskey. And with that, as you move up the category, let's say you enjoy Jameson for a number of years and you think, you know what, I'd like to try something else. You might decide to go for a Redbreast, maybe a Redbreast Lustau, which would be 46% ABV, or you might decide I want a Redbreast cask strength, which would be 55 or 56% ABV. And so, as I have found in my whiskey journey, that a whiskey that would originally, I would have had the most comfort drinking, a 40% alcohol by volume whiskey, I now find 40% alcohol by volume might not give me the tingling, the flavor, the intensity that I want personally from my whiskeys. So now I have a choice. I can go up to higher ABVs, or I can drink that 40% ABV whiskey that I always historically enjoyed. But my palate's changed. My palate has evolved. So I wanted to know this week, what did you think? Where should whiskey be? And I'm conscious as an Irishman with one foot in America and one foot in Ireland, that the American whiskey industry does not do whiskeys at 40% ABV in the most part. The hardcore bourbon drinker, the hardcore rye drinker, they're not drinking 40%, are they? There's a reason Wild Turkey 101 is so popular. There's a reason why Irish whiskey has been ignored at the higher end of passion by many American whiskey drinkers. It's because American whiskey drinkers couldn't find the proof point that they were used to. And so Irish whiskey would have tasted like water to them, or Budweiser. And so they avoided it. The good news is that there are hundreds of whiskies now coming out of Ireland that are released at much higher strengths than 40%. So I want to talk about it. I want to get your thoughts on it. I'm going to share some thoughts on it. And we're going to dive into it. First, let me take a sip. Thank you, Steve, for a heavy drop of Redbreast PX. Steve wants to know here, look, question for the group. We didn't give Steve an answer there. Should he name the basement pub he's almost finished with either the Smathers Shebeen or the Ould Well? You'll be hearing from my attorneys now on the Shebeen. I go for the Owl. I recommend the Owl Well anyway. I'm throwing that in there anyway. Give Steve your answer anyway there. All right. Let me put up on the screen. So here's the question I asked. With regards to whiskey ABVs, what are you most happy with? And I put in 3 options, and then 2 more were added. The first one was, I'm happy with whatever the whiskey company decides it should be. Only 5% of the people said that was the case. 14% said I'd prefer cask strength, so I control the dilution. 78% overwhelmingly said I'd prefer if the ABV reflected the optimal taste or flavor as decided by the blender and not the accountant. And a few other additions were added. One, Jesse Wilson would prefer more whiskies at or near 100 proof, which is 50% ABV. And Dahi said that the bean counters usually have the ultimate say. That damn bean counters, we'll find a way around them. We'll distract them with whiskey. So this overwhelming answer hits on something, because I always assumed that hardcore whiskey drinkers all wanted their whiskey at cask strength. And I had a few conversations that prompted this poll. And I was reminded by said whiskey drinkers that no, that wasn't the case at all. They said, we want to know the best way to drink it, or we want to be given the whiskey the way the experts have reckoned it should be enjoyed. So when a whiskey comes to us at cask strength, that is not how the blender necessarily wants us to enjoy it. Because you'll often find the blender saying, add a few drops of water here, add a few drops of water there, and bring it down. Now, what's a few drops of water to me might be different to a few drops to you. And a teaspoon of water to me might be a tablespoon to you, and on and on and on we go. And so it's not always that we're enjoying the whiskey the best way. However, we might find the right proof point with a bit of experimentation. But this third answer, the one I'd prefer if the ABV reflected the optimal taste, reflected some of the conversations I've had recently, which is, I don't want to do the hard work of diluting it. Let the blender tell me what way I should enjoy it. I trust them. I bought their bottle. Give it to me that way. That's what the overwhelming majority of you said. 205 votes, I think, 78% of you said this was your choice. But isn't it always a dance between the marketers, the accountants, and the blenders? If you have this week listened to our chat with Deirdre O'Carroll, who is the blender at the Midleton Distillery, one of the blenders at Midleton Distillery, she talks about how they nose and taste all of their whiskey samples at 20% ABV. 20%, 40 proof, because that is the ABV they feel most flavor profiles are available to them. And I posed the question back to Deirdre, and you can listen to this chat on storiesandsips.com. You don't need a Stories and Sips Whiskey Club membership to listen to it. It's on there. It's free. I asked, does that mean that when we're enjoying whiskey at cask strength, we're doing ourselves a disservice? And she said, no, it's up to you how you enjoy it, but that's how we get the most out of our whiskeys. That's how we are able to detect flavors and look for the off notes and look for the on notes, etc. So I thought that was quite interesting. So blenders, I've heard blenders talk about anything from 20% to 30% ABV. I've heard scientists tell me that our tongues are not capable of detecting all flavors at anything above 30% ABV. We just couldn't possibly comprehend the complexities at that alcohol proof point. And so we should be bringing our whiskeys down lower anyway. But it's controversial. And maybe it's not that it has to be definite. Maybe it's that we all have a little different approach to it. But with this in mind, I wanted to talk about some of the comments that we received under it. So one of the comments was, okay, well, actually, let's start here with the strengths, the different strengths that whiskey tends to be. Because these are very, it's not all, we don't always talk about these. So, and I use these numbers for discussion only, right? These are not always exact numbers for every distillery. They will vary. So please don't come back to me and say, Barry told me that Midleton was bottled at 80% when actually it's 84%. Their pot stills are 84%. But there are four strengths. The first is the still strength. And the still strength is when the spirit comes off that final still, whether it's the second still in double distillation or the third still in triple distillation, and whether it's column still or pot still distilled. Pot stills will distill typically up to about 84, 86%. Or as Peter Mulryan said in his manifesto, they only distill up to 71%. Column stills typically distill up to 94% alcohol by volume, right? So that's the still strength. When the spirit leaves the still, the final still, it's somewhere between 80 and 94. Typically, Peter Mulryan at Blackwater says 71. We'll add that in. So 71 to 94, right? That's the still strength. Now, that's the highest it's ever going to be. It's never going to be higher than that. What happens next? Next, that's typically too high to go into wooden barrels. Why? Because that alcohol strength will strip the wood apart. It'll burn the wood. There'll be no maturation happening at that still strength. So the spirit is cut down. It's cut down to 65, 70% alcohol by volume, and it's then put into a wooden cask, wooden barrel. There it'll mature for a minimum of 3 years, often more, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. If it leaves the cask and is immediately bottled, we call that cask strength. So there's casked strength. There's probably a different name for that. We don't talk about that very often, but that's the ABV that it went into the barrel, which is different to the spirit strength, the still strength. The cask strength is when it comes out of the cask at the end of maturation, and that would typically, not always, again, discussion, education purposes only, 55 to 65% ABV. And then you've got your bottle strength. So what we finally get it at 40 to 55% ABV, maybe a little bit higher if it's cask strength, right? So those are the four different strengths that we're kind of working with. Now, So those are numbers you got to play with. But with each lever that you push or pull, you change the price, you change the flavor, you change everything, don't you? So, but you've got those levers to play with in any case. Now, Jeff had a good comment. He said, in his opinion, cask strength is always best. That way he can taste it and the way it came out of the barrel. Supposedly when the blender decided it was ready, okay? And then start diluting with water. And I've heard this many, many times. In other words, don't sell me water, sell me alcohol. I'll add my own water in later. I have plenty of it in the house. Great comment, isn't it? And I think it's how a lot of you approach your whiskey. Entry strength, says Jeff. Yeah, that could be a name for it. Entry strength. There's probably a technical name that I have no knowledge of because, as you've gathered by now, I'm a communicator, not a maker. And I have all the qualifications of a maker. Zero. None. They have all the qualifications. I have the qualifications of a communicator, which is just to be able to open my mouth and blather. And thankfully, somebody listens at some point. So I think cask strength can be the best for certain whiskies, and some of you, I think you've found that to be the case. All right. George says he loves cask strength. He rarely enjoys anything below 46%. So some of you now are starting to see where your proof points, your favorite proof points are. Now, I will add that it varies dramatically by company, by distillery, doesn't it? And how that whiskey was made, how the whiskey was matured. How often have you heard the phrase, that doesn't taste like cask strength whiskey, in an affirmative way? In other words, I'm surprised how I'm able to enjoy this without adding water, despite the fact that it's 56%. Well, that's because of its production and how it was made, and in the barrels that it matured in, and for how long it matured, and how it was recast, and how it was married and vatted and blended and so forth. So the challenge here with this topic of whiskey ABVs, and I'm not trying to solve anything with this question, but rather have a discussion on it because I'm curious about it, because I believe personally that we should release the whiskies at cask strength and then do the diluting ourselves. But your poll comments suggest no, let the blender decide. If it's 49.22, then we go with 49.22. Because look, let's be honest, you've all looked at your whiskey bottles across the shelf and you've wondered, now how can they all be 46% ABV and still be at their optimal taste? Like, they can't all miraculously every year, different batches, all be best at 46%. Well, they're not, are they? That's just the balance, isn't it? It's the balance, it's the dance, it's the sweet spot between what can be done financially, what can reach X amount of people, what you're willing to enjoy, what the market is used to. So it may not be in any way advantageous to a whiskey brand to release it at 47.238% ABV. Also creates all kinds of technical and logistical record-keeping issues, doesn't it, when you go outside of the standard 40% or 46 or cask strength. Mood to Move has a good comment. The 40% products tend to be chill filtered and colored in some cases, not for me. So that raises another good point. So below 43%, isn't it? Alcohol by volume, whiskies tend to be chill filtered, which is a process where you bring the whiskey down below 0 degrees, which solidifies some of what the distillery might call unwanted elements. In other words, elements that cloud your drink when you add water or ice, making it look inferior in the minds of marketers. And so this chill filtering allows the solidification of those fats that can then be extracted, and therefore the whiskey will not cloud when you add your water or you add your ice. So chill filtering to a purist is a red rag to a bull. They'll charge at it. They don't want it. And then also for standardizing bottles, so mass market whiskies at 40% ABV, yes, tend to be chill filtered, and then they do have natural color added. It's called E150. It is a caramel that is typically barley derived. So it's kind of a sugar derived from the barley that is caramelized, and it allows you to add this natural coloring, which the experts will tell us is absolutely flavorless. But the purists will say, aha, I know I can taste the caramel in that whiskey. Who knows? Stacey, who's here tonight, says, I don't necessarily need cask strength, but I feel like we've reached the point where 40% is no longer acceptable for whiskey outside of what is considered budget. I would tend to agree with that. So if I want to get a whiskey to market the cheapest possible way, what I must do is I must make a blended whiskey with a massive proportion of grain, maize-derived whiskey, maize distilled whiskey, so corn, maize, 95, 96% corn, 4% malt, malted barley, so malt whiskey. That's my blend. I'll age it for 3 years, and I'll age for 3 years in wooden casks of disputable quality or character, where I'm not worried. I just want to get a thing to market as cheaply as possible. That's how I get the cheapest possible whiskey to market. 3 years old, ex-bourbon barrels that are older, tired, not their first rodeo, might be their third rodeo, aged for 3 years, bottled up at 40% and shipped. That's the cheapest way I'll get a whiskey to market. So we already know that as whiskey drinkers. So now we might look at it and say, well, hold on a second. What else have they got if they're asking for this much money? Were there sherry casks involved? Is it 46%? Is it a malt whiskey? Is it a pot still whiskey? Is it a grain whiskey? Or is it a blend whiskey? Or is it the other? Is it just Irish whiskey? So these are all questions now we get to ask ourselves. But maybe all of these points aren't as obvious to us all. They certainly weren't obvious to me when I was starting off my whiskey journey. I couldn't have told you what was the cheapest whiskey and how was it made. But now we're starting to understand as we start to tie all the dots together. I am anyway on my whiskey journey. Okay. Another comment we got was from Andrew, and this ties in with that most voted on element, which was, I prefer not to have to work to find the right taste. I also probably won't be able to repeat the flavor if trying to proof down. I'm low maintenance, so it's pour and enjoy. Good man, Andrew. Andrew knows his whiskey, enjoys his whiskey. And this goes in line with, can we let them tell us? Let them tell us, but not just the whiskey company, but the blender, because the whiskey company is saying 40%, it's cheaper, and we make more money. So I'd prefer to see random numbers. So that's why I love to see crazy random numbers out there. Now, we'll take, for example, our recent release, Cliffs of Moher whiskey. Every single one of our 3 whiskies that we released recently are all different ABVs, 55.1%, 52.3%, and 55.5% ABV. And the reason is that these were all tasted by the blender, the company owner, Louise McGuan, and she brought them to the ABV she said they tasted the best at. That's all I want. You tell me what they're best at, and we'll buy them from you. As simple as that. Ryan says, as someone who's trying to find their palate, I tend to lean on the blenders to decide where to bottle it at. I'm sure as I go along this road, my palate will change, and cask strength will be something I will dive into. But right now, I try to find the bottles above the 40% mark. There was an online crusade on a bit like a manifesto, but a crusade last year or 2 years ago on Irish Whiskey Twitter. And David Mara, a friend of ours, he started a hashtag cask strength crusade, and he wanted more and more whiskey brands to release their whiskeys at cask strength. He's an American, a Michigan man living in Ireland, and he maintained that the biggest barrier to getting the American passionate whiskey drinker into Irish whiskey was the proof points. So increase your cask strength, or increase your ABV in your bottle, and more whiskey drinkers will enjoy it. And distilleries responded. There was even some cask strength crusade releases in Ireland for this movement that Dave Mara created. So I think everyone's different, aren't they? But certainly higher proof points will appeal to those of us that want to go deeper into the whiskey. We want to decide how to dilute, or what if we're mixing our drinks? What if we're making cocktails? If you start with a 40% cocktail, 40% ABV whiskey in a cocktail, you're diluting it immediately, aren't you? With the ice and the water or whatever else you put into it, your mixer, your other juices, etc. So cocktail bartenders would love a little bit of a higher proof point to keep their cocktails at a nice high strength when they reach the lips. Okay. All right. So where do we stand? So, like, are these points kind of representative of your own experiences. Like you certainly want it to be higher than 40% is what I'm getting. Because look, this is important for whiskey brands who might tune in and listen and want to understand and want to listen to your own thoughts, because you're the whiskey consumers. Cask strength, it's going to cost more, right? And let's talk about some of those costs as you're typing in those answers. But the Irish government taxes spirits at a very, 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 very high rate. It is 46 euros or 43 euros per litre of pure alcohol is what's called duty payable on alcohol, on spirits in Ireland. So if I have a litre bottle of whiskey that is at 50% ABV, that is now a 50% litre of pure alcohol, right? Litre of 50% alcohol. That would be then taxed at half that. So the duty on that would be, let's say, $21 or 21 euros, 22 euros. If I have a 700ml bottle, then it would be 7/10 of that. So I can tell you, for example, that with every bottle of the the Cliffs, I'm getting confused with this one, the Story. With every bottle of the Cliffs of Moher whiskey that went out to you, we had to pay about 16 euros 80 cents to the Irish government. 16 euros 80 cents went to the Irish government on every single bottle of this, which is amongst the highest rates of duty payable in certainly the civilized world, but definitely in the European Union. So really, really, really high rates. So that means the higher you go, the more it's going to cost to ship it now, or to sell it, unless you're selling en masse in the United States. When if you ship in bulk, you can get the duty back so long as the duty is paid in the state in the United States where it lands. So if I ship all my whiskeys to California, I can avoid the duty in Ireland so long as all the duty is paid in California. And some states that'll work out better, and other states it won't. So bottom line, two things we can't avoid: death and taxes, no matter what we try. Dave says, expand your camera. We can't see you. Dave, why would anyone want to see me? Here you go. This is for you, Dave. Sláinte. All right. How about Irish coffee? Asks Mark. Proof needed. Well, with Irish coffee, there's no such technical definition of what Irish coffee can be, but the original Irish coffee was made with Powers. It would have been a pot still Powers back in 1952, wasn't it? That was the original Irish coffee. Today, the Buena Vista Cafe will claim that the original Irish coffee is made with Tullamore Dew. Don't listen to them. It was Powers. But most Irish coffees around the world will be made with a 40% ABV whiskey. Either Powers Gold label today, or Tullamore Dew, or Jameson, or Bushmills. If you get your Irish coffees in the Dead Rabbit in New York, you'll be drinking a Irish coffee made with a 40% ABV Bushmills original. Steve says Black Barrel Proof, which is at 50% ABV, is at a perfect ABV for an old-fashioned. Age is another factor, says Tyrone. As you get older, your ability to taste declines. So I expect my ABV preference will go up as I do the same. That's an interesting one. That's not something I'd consider now at all. Steve wants an etched version of this Glencairn. I'm going to try and get more glasses out to you folks early in 2023. We are, now that we've been focused on getting shipping sorted from Ireland for our whiskies, and I think the Cliffs of Moher whiskey, which we'll talk about in a second, helped us out a lot there and kind of proof of concept. Once we've got this logistics in place, we'll be able to ship more things. Like maybe we can include glassware with your bottle. So when you buy a bottle from the Whiskey Club, we can add the glassware in, things like that. So hopefully we're going to be able to work on that. All right, what do I want to talk about next? Okay, so let's jump on to this one. The two most interesting whiskey counties in Ireland. And if you just joined us, two requests tonight. Click the subscribe button on YouTube to our Stories and Sips channel. It's just one simple click. And then the second thing is like the video. That's it. That's all you got to do. If you like it, more people will see it and more people will fall in love with Irish whiskey. and with Dave and Steve and Stacey and all of you in the group here. The two most interesting whiskey counties in Ireland. All right. The island of Ireland consists of two different jurisdictions. The Republic of Ireland, we are a republic, country, Ireland, Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland consists of 26 counties, and I'm not getting into any political debates here. I'm just going to state the geographic facts. The Republic of Ireland is one country on the island of Ireland, and it consists of 26 counties. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which consists of 6 counties. The whole island is called Ireland, and it is made up of 32 counties. Every county in Ireland that makes whiskey can call it Irish whiskey. In fact, they can't call it English whiskey. It is Irish whiskey. So if you make whiskey in a staunchly British part of Belfast, you cannot call your whiskey British. Even though you are in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, you must call your whiskey Irish. The reason for that is because the production of Irish whiskey predates the separation of the island into two different jurisdictions. The North and the South is a later development in the island of Ireland. Whiskey has been made for a lot longer than there were two separate jurisdictions. That's why Bushmills is Irish whiskey as equally as Jameson is Irish whiskey, despite them being in two different jurisdictions. That's an important point for us to make. Because there are now 42 distilleries on the island of Ireland, there are 42 distilleries north and south of the border, all making whiskey that is called Irish whiskey. And that's an interesting pub fact that might come up. And the protection that is afforded Irish whiskey in the European Union is called a GI, or a geographical indicator. A geographical indicator means there are certain criteria that are met that allow you to use a term, a phrase that is protected, a GI protection, which then involves a production method that aligns with this GI, this geographical indicator, which means Irish whiskey. So for the GI of Irish whiskey, it is Irish whiskey must be made and matured on the island of Ireland. Once those things are in place, you can call it Irish whiskey. Geographical indicators also apply to things like champagne, which is sparkling wine from the Champagne region of France. If you buy a sparkling wine in a bodega in New York for $3 a bottle and it says champagne on it, well, it's technically breaking the law of protection, this geographical indicator, if the United States has recognized that GI. Now, the United States might not recognize all the GIs, but Irish whiskey is afforded this protection where if it says Irish whiskey on the label, it means it is produced on the island of Ireland. There is no other food or drink product that I know of, or that anyone can tell me, that is shared between two different jurisdictions. In other words, sherry comes from the Jerez region of the southwest of Spain. It cannot be made anywhere else on earth. It doesn't share its production with anywhere else. Yet Irish whiskey shares it amongst two jurisdictions, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That's unique. It crosses a country border into both in now and out of the European Union. The United Kingdom is no longer part of the European Union. So Irish whiskey is made in the European Union and outside the European Union at the same time, which is a remarkable little bit of pub trivia for you. So do we have any guesses on the two most interesting whiskey counties in Ireland? Kristen says, oh, she's just throwing in every county she knows. Okay. Cork, says Dave. Kerry, says David. Antrim, says Mark. Waterford, says Matt. Cian asks, do you have to call it Irish or is there just no UK categorization? There is English whiskey that is fighting my understanding is that English whiskey is they're writing their rules of what they'd like it to be categorized as, but I don't believe there's an English whiskey category, but there's Scotch whiskey, of course, which is the United Kingdom kind of category. But of course, that is Scotland only, not England. Lots of you guessing Waterford. Matt's having a Waterford single farm, single malt, Dunmore Farm. Very good. Waterford. Lots of you saying Waterford, and some of you saying, all right, the two counties have been guessed. The first is County Down in the 6 counties in Northern Ireland, on the most easterly part of the island of Ireland, County Down. That is the first most interesting county, and I'll talk about why it is in a second. The second most interesting county is County Waterford. Waterford and Down. Waterford and Down, to me, this is my opinion, mine alone. You might share my opinion, but it is to me the most interesting county, the 2 most interesting counties. County Down and County Waterford. County Down, look at who County Down is home to. Ecklandville Distillery, Hinch Distillery, Killowen Distillery, Redemin Estate Distillery, Copeland Distillery, and 2 Stacks. Ecklandville, we have talked at length on last week's show about Ecklandville Distillery. We'll talk a lot more about them in the coming weeks and months, because we're hoping to do a whiskey release with them exclusively for our club. They are doing really great things with their sourced whiskies from Cooley Distillery and Bushmills Distillery, and their bonding and their whiskey blending, or not blending, but their whiskey bonding and recasking is fantastic. And they are releasing extraordinary single malts, 18 to 21, 22 years of age, out of Ecklandville. They've also got their sourced whiskies that are 12 years of age and younger, 10 years of age and younger, but they've got some extraordinary sourced whiskies, and they've got their own single pot still and single malt whiskies being made in Ecklandville as well. And Old Cumber being one of them. I know lots of you have just discovered Ecklandville, but to me, they are very innovative, not just in how they're approaching whiskies they've sourced, but in the whiskies that they're making as well. They have been making whiskey for, what is it now, 7, 8 years in, and they've yet to release fully their own whiskey. They had all of the rights to do so many years ago, but they've not yet released their own whiskey. Not yet. But that, I think, is about to change very, very soon. They are very, very innovative. Hinch Distillery, doing really interesting things with wine cask finishes. The owner of Hinch Distillery is also the owner of a wine estate. Dr. Terry Cross, he owns a winery in France. And so that is being utilized as well in Hinch Distillery. Killowen Distillery is the County Down equivalent of what's happening in Blackwater in Waterford. And Killowen Distillery, lots of fans here, I know, of Killowen Distillery. Maybe Ireland's smallest distillery. I don't know if that's been beaten yet, if there's a smaller one. Perhaps there is. Boylock Distillery actually might be smaller in Donegal. But Killowen Distillery just released their first whiskies a couple of weeks ago. And I think I'd be hard pushed to find anybody who would argue with me that what Killowen is doing isn't interesting. Redemin Estate Distillery, the makers of Short Cross whiskey. I saw somebody here earlier drinking Short Cross rye and malt. That was their first main core range whiskey released. I absolutely love what Redemin Estate is doing. I think they're the most unknown, underappreciated distillery in Ireland today, doing incredible things with woods that are not being done anywhere else in Ireland. And they are making they're making malt whiskies in ways that are not being made anywhere else in Ireland, with different size stills and combinations of stills. And I would expect nothing less of a rocket, a missile engineer, David, who and his wife, who built the distillery. That's a really interesting distillery. We're going to do a release for our club with Short Cross whiskey, which is the whiskey brand from Redemin Estate as well. Copeland Distillery. I don't know anything about Copeland, I'll be quite honest with you. They have some sourced whiskies out in the market. I don't know the owners. I don't know the people behind it. It's on my list to get to know, but they're also in County Down. And then, of course, 2 Stacks, which is not a distillery, but a whiskey independent bottler. And they're in Newry in County Down as well. Stacey says she just won a Hinch Stout cask at Irish Whiskey auctions today. Very good. Matt says County Down is more stacked than he realised. Copeland Distillery. I see a few of you have got Copeland there. I don't think I've ever tried Copeland sourced whiskies. They have about 5 or 6 different. They have whiskies, rums, and gins, and vodkas on Irish malts. When I checked earlier today, because I was trying to find out more about Copeland, I'll try to find out more about them. It's getting harder and harder to keep up, but we'll do our best. But what a who's who of the Irish whiskey world right now, and I've long maintained that within an hour's drive of Belfast, you will meet some of the most interesting people and most exciting things happening in Irish whiskey on the island of Ireland, because an hour outside Belfast, you'll get to Bushmills in Northern Ireland, and you'll get to every single one of these, which is fantastic. And that's a great thing. So Belfast, to me, is quickly becoming the center of the Irish whiskey world. Belfast, the center of the Irish whiskey world, which was not something I thought we would see so soon, so quick. So County Down, if you're planning whiskey trips to Ireland, Belfast, you could do worse than positioning yourself in Belfast. So Tyrone, there's a list for you now. If you're going up to Northern Ireland, put a few of these on your list. If you can get to Ecklinville and Killowen and Redemin Estate specifically, you'll see some really interesting things happening right there. Next up, County Waterford. We've got some interesting companies in Waterford. Waterford Distillery, Blackwater Distillery, and our friend Dahi O'Connell from W.D. O'Connell Whisky Merchants. They're all located in Waterford, which is, well, let's call it Cork, right? Because it's right on the Cork border. Well, it's the county the closest to Cork on the east. And I can get to Waterford in 30 minutes from where I am. And so it's very, very close. But let's be honest, who would argue with the interesting things happening at Waterford Distillery over the past 6 years? Incredible, incredible. You know, I'm a big fan. I might be biased. I'm the host of the Waterford Whisky podcast, have been for the past 2 years. I do that for no other reason than I believe in what they're doing with grain, with barley. I had a very skeptical viewpoint of Waterford when they first opened. I had a raised eyebrow, but I listened to the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln, who said, I don't like that man. I should get to know him better. And I dug deeper, and I asked for a tour, and I asked for a look around the distillery. And I left the distillery knowing and proclaiming it to be the most interesting whiskey project on the island of Ireland, something I still maintain to this day, that what they're doing in Waterford Distillery, we will look back on it in 10 years and say, we were there at the start. We tasted those early whiskies, because there will be I still maintain there will be very few distilleries in Ireland that will be feted globally as much as Waterford is. And it'll put Irish whiskey on the map in front of drinkers of whiskey or drinkers of anything, wine drinkers, who would never have touched Irish whiskey before. Waterford will crack that nut. And you talk about ABVs, Waterford releases their whiskies at 4 or 50% ABV. Blackwater Distillery, we've just discussed at length. W.D. O'Connell. Any of you who have come across Dahi O'Connell, we have had Dahi O'Connell on our Stories and Sips tastings. We did one tasting with Dahi O'Connell. We did a quarterly tasting, so we tasted some of Dahi's whiskies. Dahi is a whiskey bonder and bottler. He's a whiskey merchant. He sources whiskey from different distilleries, not just in Ireland, also in Scotland. And he creates further finishes, further ages, marries, etc., the whiskies together. And he's laying down whiskey in many different distilleries around Ireland. His initial plans were to build a distillery, quickly realized how expensive that was going to be. And he is instead fitting out a brand home for W.D. O'Connell in Waterford instead. So you can go visit his bonded facility in Waterford, which is taking shape right now. Okay, so look, those two counties, Waterford and Down, they couldn't be further apart. It'd be about a 4-hour drive between them, which to most Americans is just like cutting across town. But in Ireland, that's the length of the country. So you have to go from the south coast almost to the north coast to get between these two counties. But I think that some of the most interesting things are happening here. 7 distilleries across 2 counties, which means 16-17% of all Irish whiskey distilleries are located in just these 2 counties. And they're really interesting distilleries and really interesting brands as well. So I highlight these only because Waterford and Down keep coming up over and over and over and over again. And I started to wonder, is there something in the water? Is there something in the air? Are they on the same latitude? What is it that, and they're not. I checked, I thought maybe there's something to it here, but they're different latitudes. In any case, they have no connection whatsoever, except they both make Irish whiskey. Stacey says Down and Waterford are putting the pressure on Cork for Irish whiskey domination. So the county with the most distilleries, who's the county with the most distilleries? I think it's Down. Or is it Dublin? So Dublin has Roe & Co., Teeling, Pierce Lyons, and Dublin Liberties Distillery. That's 4. Down has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think there's another county with 5 distilleries. Are there trains to County Down? No, there's a train from Dublin to Belfast, and from there you're on your own. You're on your own. There's no trains. You'd have to rent a car in Belfast to get you around, or rent a driver, hire a driver. Kristen wants to know, how does it feel? How does it make a Cork boy feel that you didn't choose your own county? Look, it goes without saying that the best county in Ireland is Cork. All I'm saying is that the 2 most interesting whiskey counties currently are Waterford and Down. My love for Cork has not faded. And let's be honest, 90% of all whiskey on the island of Ireland comes from about 12 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. So we can't ever discount it. And Kevin O'Gorman will never forgive me if I didn't hero the great work they're doing in Midleton Distillery. But for me, the most interesting things by county level, Waterford and Down. Cork, raise the game, come at it, challenge these 2. Cork has Clonakilty Distillery, West Cork Distillers, Black's Distillery in Kinsale. You never hear anything about Black's. And Midleton Distillery, 4 distilleries in Cork. I think County Down has the most distilleries. Dave says, you taught me there was Cork and not Cork. I'm expanding my horizons. All right. What's next? Let's go back one other point. Upcoming events. All right, folks, we had a raffle this week. For those of you who are not aware or who've joined me for the first time, you see some new names here tonight. And my first thing to say is welcome. You're very welcome to our wee corner of the internet where we talk about Irish whiskey. We're hosting an event in 1 week's time. What day is today? Sunday. This time next week, I'll be in Cleveland, Ohio, getting ready to kick off a 2-day celebration of the Festival of Midleton Whiskies. And I think we're actually sold out now. This might need to be updated. Maybe there's one place left. I'm not sure. But festivalofwhiskies.com is the website. In any case, we're opening a 47-year-old whiskey, a $46,000 bottle of whiskey in aid of charity. We're aiming to raise $50,000 for Malky House, an end-of-life charity. And we raffled off a place at that complete seat for both nights of our festival, which involves 10 plus whiskies, hosted by Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller of Midleton Distillery, and myself. And the raffle was drawn just last Friday night. And I've been traveling all weekend. I only got back today. So the raffle was drawn. There was 2 winners. One was for night number 1 and one was for both nights. Both winners are from the Cleveland area. One was a bartender from downtown Cleveland, and another lived about 40 minutes from just outside Cleveland. And Sean Gormley, the owner of the pub who is hosting these events, has been in touch with both winners. So if you haven't heard from anybody, you haven't won. If you don't live near Cleveland, you haven't won. If you're not a bartender in downtown Cleveland, sadly, you haven't won. However, you'll be delighted to hear that the number of tickets sold has allowed us to generate a lot of money for charity. The final amount will be shared on next week. We were hoping to beat $50,000, and I'll share with you the final numbers next week. For those of you who are coming to Ohio, I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. I know there's some folks here on night number 1 who are joining us, where there's about 100 people who will be joining us for our tasting on night number 1. Night number 2, we've only got 20 seats. Some of you are joining us on that night as well. We're going to have a great night, great 2 nights up there. This time next week, we'll do a little Shebeen from Cleveland. So on Sunday night, we will try at the same time, 7 o'clock Eastern, to go live from Cleveland. So we certainly won't be doing a 2-hour Shebeen or even a 1-hour Shebeen, but we'll try and tune in for half an hour. I'll see if I can get Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller, to join in, Sean Gormley, and a few others who are in Cleveland at the same time. We'll try and do it from Gormley's pub in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's not confirmed, but if you are in Cleveland, Ohio, on Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern, maybe you can join in for a live Shebeen. We'll see what we can do. No promises, but we'll see what we can do. So we're going to try it. We're going to try and do it live. We'll do it live from Gormley's. All right, what's up next? We did the interesting whiskey counties. Okay, club news. Cliffs of Moher whiskey. Folks, You came out in your droves for these beauties. Look, here's a full set. Where's the other one? Thought it was gone. This is the Cliffs of Moher collection. 3 single malt whiskies of the darkest color you've ever seen a 6-year-old whiskey in your life. Look at that. Natural color, extracted from 50-litre casks over the past 6 months, aging on the Cliffs of Moher, 700 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. The first ever whiskies aged in a tower on the Cliffs of Moher. The first ever single pot still whiskey released by J.J. Corrie, and the first ever single casks released by J.J. Corrie, and we got 3 of them, all released for the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club. You came out in your droves to purchase these, folks. We've been shipping them all over the past few days. I think about 65 or 70 of you have already received your whiskies across the United States. 190 bottles, I think, were shipped. So more of you will be getting yours Monday, Tuesday, presumably, as well. We expect to have about 20 bottles left. So what we're going to do is we are going to redraw from the ballot. So when you entered the ballot, you told us if you wanted to be informed if there was a second bottle available to you. So what we'll do is those of you who didn't yet get a second bottle, some of you already did because of the ballot, how it worked. Those of you who didn't, but who want one, will be put into a hat, and 20 names will be drawn, and you will be allocated a whiskey based on that ballot. You'll then be emailed a link to make your purchase. We'll do that probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. And the reason we're delaying that is because I want to make sure all the other whiskies land and arrive. And if they don't, we need backups. We need replacements. So the 20 number might go down, or it might stay the same. I think we've only had 1 breakage so far. Every breakage is a loss. But if there's more breakage or more loss, we'll have to dip into the 20. So I purposely held back 20 as a buffer in case there's shipping issues, loss, what have you. So I expect that these will go quickly in the next week as well. I have 3 dates with Louise McGuan, the founder of J.J. Corrie, for a tasting of these. And the 3 dates that I proposed to her are December 12th, 13th, or 15th. So I know that's a little bit away, and you're not expected to wait. That's 2 weeks away. If you get these whiskies, you want to open them, by all means, but you can join J.J. Corrie founder Louise McGuan and me for a tasting of these on either the December 12th, 13th, or 15th. I'm finalizing that date at the moment based on Louise's travel, my travel, and we'll get that solved tomorrow and get that date out to you. But the response to these whiskies was just fantastic. And look, here's an exciting thing. For the first time ever, the 2 J.J. Corrie releases 2 years apart are in the same room. The Story and the Cliffs of Moher. It's a big moment. And thank you all for your support. Matt says he's only just found out and joined the club last week, so I've missed it. Don't worry, Matt. I'm hoping to do 10 releases in 2023. 10 releases, hopefully. Cheryl would like to get a 3rd bottle. Cheryl, I'd say you'd like to get 20 bottles if we give them to you. No fear of you. I know it would mean so much to you to get more bottles, and many of you have reached out to me privately saying, pick me, pick me, pick me, and you know that I can't do it that way, and you know why I can't do it that way, because it's not fair. Instead, what we're doing is, look, we have more than 250 club members, way more. We have only 210 bottles, and we thought the fairest thing to do was enter the ballot. And the good news was that everyone who entered the ballot got at least one. Everyone. So I think we had 170 people enter the ballot. And we were able to give every single person 1 bottle. And then some of you were able to get a 2nd bottle. And then more of you will be able to get a 2nd bottle. I wish we could do more. But here was the challenge. When we tasted the whiskies, some of you were there. Cheryl, you were on the cliffs when we tasted these whiskies. Kristen, you were on the cliffs. Rick, you were on the cliffs. We tasted 3 that were standouts, didn't we? And the others we thought, okay, but the 3 were standouts. We had 9 casks we tasted. These were the 3. So that created a bit of a dilemma. Do you go for an inferior whiskey to the 3 and say, well, we have enough people in the club, even if they're not the best whiskies, or do we just take the 3 that are the best and know that not everyone will get all of them, but everyone will get one? I think we made the right decision, and I put it to you earlier, and you all suggested this as well. So that's the decision we made. So look, there'll be more whiskies. There won't be more of these ones, but there'll be more of other collaborations, and we'll do interesting firsts. We'll do new. There'll be new things, new approaches, not just to the whiskey, but events we'll wrap around the whiskies, giveaways, bundles. We'll do bundles of things. But guess what we're building now, folks? We are building what I'm calling the Stories and Sips Liquid Archive. And the Stories and Sips Liquid Archive started before we even had a club with this one, which was The Story, which was a pandemic release. As the pandemic kicked off, we went to JJ Corrie and she released 200 bottles with us, right? That was our first whiskey. Then came this whiskey, the first ever 12-year-old single grain released by Two Stacks, called the Craic. So we've had the Story, we've had the Craic, and now we've got the Cliffs of Moher, 3 whiskies. We've now had 5 core Stories and Sips whiskey releases. And we've had this collaboration with Talnua Distillery in Colorado, the first ever single pot still American whiskey, which was released to us, the Stories and Sips members, and our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group. So our liquid archive stands at 6 bottles and growing. So we have a backup of a few bottles of each of these that over time we'll build this archive so that the liquid archive can be used in the future when we eventually have our own premises, our own in-person gathering place. And some of these will be opened and some will stay on the shelf, never to be opened, but as a permanent reflection of the growth of the club and the number of brands that hopefully we've been able to support through our collaborations over the years. So I expect this number to grow with your support, and hopefully we can keep releasing whiskies that you're interested in and growing the club enough that'll support them. Our challenge always is how many whiskies to commit to. We have to put money up front for some of these whiskies, and if they don't sell, we're on the hook. And we have to pay the brands. They have their costs. We're not going to let them go hungry because we can't sell a whiskey. So we'll pay up front for the whiskies, and then it means we have to sell out. And if we don't sell out, we carry the cost. So there's going to be a couple of super high-end whiskies that we'll release in 2023 that we may end up carrying the cost of for a bit, but I believe it's important to have a high-end element of our whiskey club for those who like 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old whiskies. We'll have that covered with some releases, and we'll have new, really flavorful, really interesting 3-year-old, 4-year-old whiskies and everything in between as well. So a lot there. All right. Let me look here. Tony says raffle 1 in Cleveland. No, Tony, these are all for the club members, and it wouldn't be fair for me to give them away anywhere else except the Whiskey Club. You commit every month to your membership, and I have to honor that. So as much as I'd like to do that, what we will do is I will announce next week or the week after, certainly early in December, I'll announce a charity donation on behalf of the Whiskey Club. So that'll be a way, and we'll talk about that in a few weeks' time, and hopefully that'll go some way towards raising some funds or sharing some funds because of our kind of our mutual successes with what we're doing here. So those will all the numbers or the names will be drawn from the ballot in the next week. John Doyle can't wait for the Stories and Sips 10-year celebration. John, that'll be some session. We have whiskies we have casks put down in different places at the moment that could end up being 10-year-old casks. Like we may leave them. There's 5 casks I know of that we have right now that I know of, as if we have 100. I've got 5 casks now as part of the club that are aging in different places that may reach 10 years. And so hopefully the club is still going and we're all still drinking and enjoying whiskey together. Johnny says, put them on a shelf in our castle. All right, what else do we have to talk about? Okay, a couple of upcoming events. So for those of you who are just joined our whiskey club, fantastic, and you're very welcome. like Matt. So delighted that you're joining us. We do monthly events outside of whiskey releases where we bring you the people behind whiskey and doing interesting things in the world of whiskey. Here's an interesting one that we've got coming up this week, which is meeting the people behind the Dead Rabbit, the most awarded Irish pub in the world. You're going to meet Jack McGarry, the founder, and Mark McLaughlin, who is the director of Irish Whiskey, newly appointed in the past couple of months. That is this week, December 1st. What's that, Thursday night? And 7 o'clock Eastern. If you haven't already registered, go to storiesandsips.com, go to the Meet the Maker page, and you will be able to register for it. We're going to have a private Zoom with Jack and Mark where they're going to share what it took to build the world's most awarded, world's best pub. Dead Rabbit has won best pub in the world a number of years in a row, best Irish pub in the world. I've never seen a pub that better represents the Ireland I love than the Dead Rabbit. They've just announced a massive expansion plan that'll grow the Dead Rabbit to 15 locations in the next 5 years. Mark McLaughlin is leading their Irish whiskey program, which means Mark decides what Irish whiskies are going to be behind the bar, why, which locations will get which whiskies, how they build a cocktail program and an Irish whiskey menu around Irish whiskies throughout the entire group. This is fascinating behind the scenes stuff, folks. If you've ever been to the Dead Rabbit in New York, you know what level of a pub this is. If you order a pint of Guinness, an Irish coffee, an Irish stew on a Tuesday or a Sunday or 6 months apart or from 10 different servers over 10 different visits, your experience will be exactly the same every time. They are maniacal about process, and they're going to share how they're going to take these processes that they've perfected at the Dead Rabbit and expand them to other locations. Now, they're not taking the entire Dead Rabbit to 15 locations. They're taking the Irish pub component, not the cocktail bar upstairs, but they're taking the Irish pub component, the downstairs component of the Dead Rabbit to 15 locations. I really hope you'll tune in for this because it's going to be a fantastic session. And you get to ask questions of Jack and Mark. We may also be announcing an event that we're hosting there in February in the Dead Rabbit in New York. So we are trying to put an event together at the moment with two very, very exciting whiskey brands who have very, 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 very exciting whiskeys. And hopefully we'll have things buttoned up in a way that we can talk about them. Or if we don't, we'll at least tell you what we're working on. And then we'll tell you if it doesn't come through, we'll at least keep you posted. But we can tell you what we're working on. That's taking place this Thursday. What else have we got in our whiskey club? Deirdre O'Carroll, Midleton's whiskey blender. So the recent release from Midleton was this single pot still from Jameson. Some of you had this. Some of you managed to find this. It's not available in the United States, so you probably shipped it from Ireland. Deirdre was instrumental in the creation of this single pot still whiskey. She is one of three blenders. She's working under Billy Lighton, the master blender, and Dave McCabe and Deirdre O'Carroll are the blenders responsible for the Redbreasts and the Jamesons and the Spot whiskies that you know and love. They are the blenders that put them together. We chatted with Deirdre for about 35-40 minutes. A great chat. Recorded the video. It's on our website, storiesandsips.com. I recommend you go and watch it because Deirdre shares her approach to nosing, to tasting, to evaluating a whiskey. She is also responsible for the 40-year prediction of whiskey demand. She's got a spreadsheet for 40 years. Imagine that responsibility. I wouldn't sleep at night unless I had a whiskey or two. So go check out the video interview chat. It happened live in the blending room. So Deirdre joined us from the blending room. When she started the chat, she said, Barry, I've had to turn a few bottles around on my shelves behind me because some of the labels will indicate some future releases. And so I was trying to see behind her. Her camera wasn't high def enough for me to zoom in 6 feet behind her to get the labels, but clearly they're working on some interesting things. And I've had some conversations with the team at Midleton in the past week, actually, where they have suggested that in the first quarter of 2023, we're going to see some incredible releases out of the distillery. Imagine, as if we're not spending enough money. Can't keep up. Cannot keep up. So check it out. Deirdre is a star in the whiskey world. She is the nicest person, a very giving person with her time and her knowledge. And I could listen to Deirdre talk about blending all day long because I learn something every time I listen to her. So if you're at all interested, go to storiesandsipscom and check out that interview. All of our content, our links to register for upcoming events, our links to register for whiskeys, for our club, links to join the club are all available on storiesandsipscom. We're called Stories and Sips for a very simple reason. I mentioned it earlier. I believe that the stories of the people, the places, and the passion behind the pours make whiskey even better. And I want to bring all of these stories to you through these people, through these places, so that you can enjoy whiskey from the people and the brands that maybe you would not otherwise have encountered. And that's what Stories and Sips is all about. And I'm very, very grateful that so many of you follow this journey of all of these fantastic people in the world of Irish whiskey. All right. If you haven't joined the club, you can join the club. It's storiesandsipscom/club. I would love to have you. How does our whiskey club work? It's slightly different to other clubs. It's very simple. Every month you pay $20, and that $20 gets you access to all of our online events, all of our back catalogue of videos, of interviews, of behind-the-scenes tours. If you want to take a tour of the Bushmills distillery for 3 hours, you can do so. If you want to go to the oldest warehouse on the Midleton distillery with Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller, and see whiskies that are 40, 50 years of age, you can do so in our whiskey club. If you want to take a tour of the still house where they distill all the whiskey in Midleton, we got a rare behind-the-scenes tour of the still house where cameras are typically not allowed. Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller, brought us in to the distillery and allowed, we had to sign off on all of these health and safety forms to allow us to bring in our cameras, and we filmed inside the still house. I don't know of anywhere else where you're going to get all this access to the world of Irish whiskey. It's $20 a month, and it gets you access to all of our whiskey bottles. So when we release a whiskey, only our whiskey club members can purchase a bottle. Nobody else outside of the whiskey club gets access. We do quarterly tastings. In 2023, we'll have 4 quarterly tasting events where you'll be able to get whiskey packs shipped to your door. Sometimes you'll pay the shipping on them. Other times you won't pay a penny, and we'll get them to your door. It'll depend on the logistics and the state of the world in 2023. But rest assured, if at any point during your membership it's not for you, you can leave. And if you join up and you don't like it after month 1, just message me and I'll give you your money back. I don't want you to stay if I'm not earning your money every single month. We're building an amazing community here. Whiskey brands and whiskey companies want to do things with us because of our growing purchasing power and interest. You all are showing such interest in the whiskey brands like Two Stacks and Killowen and Ecklenville and Moher, and the whiskey brands and the owners of the distilleries tell me it means something to them. Bushmills, it means so much to Alex and to Lauren at Bushmills when you reach out to them. So keep it up. We're creating a nice route to market for these brands that wouldn't otherwise be able to reach you. All right. So let me pause there while I blow my nose and put this on mute. Do we ship to Canada? Asks Tyrone. Irish Malts, don't believe ships to Canada, who is our fulfillment partner at the moment. Canada, as you well know, makes life very, very difficult. So my recommendation is to find somebody on the American side of the border who can hopefully help you. But Canada is very, very difficult. I'll double check with our fulfillment partner to see if there's anything they can do. Not all of our whiskies come through Irish Malts. Our quarterly tasting kits are often shipped from whiskey companies within the United States who are based there. So it's not always the case. So every release is slightly different as we navigate the different state and country laws. So we don't officially support Canada in anything other than we love Canadians, but we find it very difficult to do business with Canada for reasons you all well know. Kristen says you can have $20 a month forever. She's been paying Ancestry $40 a month for the last year and a half. Take your money away from Ancestry. Buy 3 memberships to Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, and then you'll have 3 chances for all the tasting kits. Yeah, we're all guilty of those monthly donations and subscriptions and things, the software as a service, everything is X as a service now, isn't it? And if we were to actually sit down and look at our bank statements in detail, we'd probably pass out. Pass out, we would. If you haven't clicked on the like or subscribe button, do me a favor and do that. Otherwise, I believe we have got very close to the very end of our Shebeen. $20 a month gets you an icon and ruffians. Where else would you spend $20 and get an icon and ruffians? So the ruffians is a self-selected group within our club who have decided that at every opportunity they will shake down a distillery or a brand for advance access to upcoming releases, with the promise that they'll buy X number of bottles if they're released to the ruffians. We've yet to witness what will happen if a brand says no. And I'm afraid of pitchforks and torches being brought to the island of Ireland if their demands aren't met. But I do like this aggression meets passion. There's a kind of a fine line there where it borders on, well, it's that weird kind of love meets stalker-ishness. And I suppose we'd have to keep an eye on you so that you'll stay on the right side, because I'm not bailing you out of jail in County Down or in County Waterford. But the ruffians, I suspect, will have an outsized influence in the future, because as our club grows, the more people who say, we're in for everything, just tell us which distillery is going to release something, and one of the ruffians will act as a viceroy of the club and will reach out and say, I represent the club, and I demand 50 bottles of your upcoming single malt before the general public, before the proletariat gets access to it, and we will agree to buy said whiskey. It's an interesting proposition for a distillery who may feel afraid to upset this growing purchasing block. Good night, Tyrone. Thanks for joining. Jason Thornton in Australia, if you ask for me to sing a song one more time, we're booting you out. There'll be no singing. Those days are gone. The only singing, if you want to hear me sing, here's what you have to do. You have to go on another whiskey bus. You heard a lot of singing from me on that whiskey bus, Jason Thornton, as you well know. And I sent you back to Australia with plenty of jingle jangles in your head. So I'm not anymore waking my house at 2:18 a.m. in the morning to sing a song so that you at 9:18 in the morning in Sydney or wherever you are can have a good old chuckle at my jingle jangles. Go back and look at the 63 lock-ins we did in a row to get your songs. That's all I'll say to you. This group is helping support the Irish economy. It is a mere scratch. Irish whiskey stalkers. You're some crowd, as we say in Ireland. You're some shower. You're some shower. What else have we got to talk about? Well, I'll be heading to Ohio in a few days, and we'll be broadcasting. Hopefully, we'll broadcast next Sunday from Gormley's Pub. We'll do our best. We will do our very best. And if we can't broadcast, we'll let you know. Okay. Any questions? Don't ask me for songs. This is starting to feel like that one band has got one hit and they've been doing tours for 30 years and they sing like 25 other songs, but everyone only goes there for the one song and they're sick of singing it, but they realize it's the only way anyone comes to the gigs in the first place. I'm beginning to feel like all you want is like the old triangle being sang. You don't need any of this preamble. This 2.5 hour whiskey preamble is just a waste of time, I think. You're only here for the singing. Oh, yes. Good point from Stacey. If we were to sing, on YouTube, our Shebeen might be taken down for copyright infringement because any singing I do would be so remarkably close to the original. It would be of such high standard that YouTube would be like, wait, is that like a perfect replica, a perfect version of that song by Aerosmith that Barry's singing? So they might take it down. The other is that it affects your channel. Like there's ads running our channel that generate about $3 a month, massive sums of money, and our channel could be demonetized, and I would lose access to $36 a year, which, that would be half a bottle of whiskey. What would I do then? Jason wants to know, where's my award? My award was picked up by. Okay, so here's my last award behind me. That's 2021. That's the 2021 award there. Right? The 2023 award has gone missing. It was stolen by Michael Walsh, the head distiller at Bohan Distillery, who himself and Fionnán O'Connor. I was overseas when the awards were being during the awards show. I was overseas. I couldn't attend. So Michael Walsh was kind enough to go in my stead. But here's the quandary we're in now. He took the award home to Drogheda, to Bohan Distillery. And since that time, he has been offered ransoms and bribes by Irish whiskey community members who want to take the award from him and bring it on a permanent roadshow around Ireland and take a different picture of it every day in a place where I'm not, so that I never get the award. And they'll like send me a picture every day and say, if you want it, come get it. It's in Achill Island in Mayo. And there's even talk now of it going to Antarctica. Somebody's got a contact that they'll bring it to Antarctica. So I don't know if I'll ever see this award again. So we'll just have to dine out on previous successes, because the 2023's one may never make it into my hands. John said, is there a release date on Peter's new book? So Peter's new book is just a manifesto, John, which comes with his whiskey manifesto box. So this is the little book. It's 67 pages. It's only a small book, right? So it's that thin. And it comes with the whiskey kit. So the 4 whiskeys that'll be released on November 30th that you can buy after you join the live stream, you'll be able to, when you buy the box, it'll have this book inside it. I don't think there's another way to get hold of this. I think it's just produced for the 1,000 kits that were made up, 1,000 whiskey boxes with the 4 samples. That's included. That's it. I don't think there's any other way to get it, I'm afraid. Jeff said that was the beginning of a season of The Wire. What, Communicator of the Year, Icon of Whiskey, Irish Whiskey Communicator of the Year was the start of a season of The Wire. God, that's a great coincidence. So what do we got coming up this week? We've got 2 events this week. Wednesday the 30th, Blackwater Distillery, Dirtgrain Whiskey. That's the launch, okay? 3 p.m. Eastern. Blackwater Distillery Facebook, Blackwater Distillery YouTube. I'll put the links in our Facebook group and on social media. I'll send them out by email too. That's Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thursday night, Meet the Maker with the Dead Rabbit. Okay, Meet the Maker with the Dead Rabbit is on Thursday, the 1st. And I really, 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 really want a good crowd to attend that as well, to show Jack and McGarry our support for what they're doing at the Dead Rabbit. And then I'm off to Ohio to drink whiskey, pour whiskey, and raise some money, hopefully. All right, so listen, folks, we with the best of intentions, this is supposed to be an hour every Sunday night. Here we are 2.5 hours later, but I thank you all most sincerely. The sharing of the stories of Irish whiskey is the joy of my life, and it is what I wake up excited to do. It's what I spend my days researching, reading about, talking to people about, listening, learning, trying to understand, trying to gather more information around the world of Irish whiskey so that I can share it, because I think what we're doing in Ireland around whiskey is some of the greatest stuff that's being done. And all I want to do is talk about it, not sing about it, but talk about it. And I'm just so fortunate that we have got this wonderful community that has gathered around these stories, gathered around these sips. And I am eternally grateful for the support you've shown, not just Stories and Sips, but the Irish whiskey industry, the independent brands and bottlers and distillers and people who represent the world of Irish whiskey. It is not unnoticed. And I want you to know that. So please, please, please know that the Irish whiskey industry pays attention to your support, and they're thankful for it, and they love our community, and long may it grow. And if you know people who'd like to join it, we'd love to have them, because we're only getting started. And I'll be saying that for the next 10 years. So I'll leave you at that note. All I can say is sláinte. If you have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anytime, you know how to find me. I'm on about 57 different social media channels and emails. You know how to find me. And we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as is possible. So until next week, thanks everyone for your support. And all I'll say is sláinte. Drink yourself something Irish tonight and every night. And we'll see you soon.